There are lives that end because of money, emotional conflict, or revenge. But in Lima, Peru, one life was taken over something as trivial: a plate of fried rice worth less than $2. Inside a small neighborhood restaurant, 22-year-old Shirley Silva argued about the lack of chicken in her meal. Seconds later, she reached into her bag, not for coins, but for a gunshot to the head of the young cook. The bullet, piercing through his skull and striking the wall, turned the late-night dinner into a nightmare. Everyone froze, no one daring to move except Shirley and her friend. They simply walked out as if nothing had happened, leaving behind a scene of horror. This event marked the culmination of years filled with chaos, abuse, and crime, experiences that ultimately defined the woman Peruvians would later recognize as La Gata. Shirley Silva was born on September 22, 1995, in Lima, the capital of Peru. She was the first child of Angel Silva and Sandra Yizel Padilla, a young couple from Esperanza. Angel was only 18 years old when he became a father, while Sandra was just 16. As time passed, their family grew. Shirley was later joined by two younger brothers, Kennedy, and eventually, the youngest sibling, Angel. However, their parents' relationship was unstable, and both later had children with other partners. Shirley's childhood was far from easy. She grew up in a troubled home, witnessing violence and hardship from an early age. Her father would disappear for extended periods, and her mother was often absent as well. This left Shirley with the heavy responsibility of caring for her younger siblings, despite still being a child herself. It is believed that she dropped out of school during her first year of secondary education. When her parents finally separated, the children were caught in the middle of bitter conflicts and accusations. Sandra frequently reported Angel for domestic violence, while Angel, in turn, accused Sandra of neglecting their children. Official reports describe the siblings as unkempt, malnourished, and infested with lice. The lack of affection from her parents took its toll. Their ongoing disputes created a toxic environment, and Shirley often bore the brunt of their aggression. She endured physical abuse from both, and her freedom was severely restricted. She was rarely allowed to go out and enjoy life as other children did. Shirley would later describe her father as someone who did not always behave rationally, as he suffered from schizophrenia. As for her mother, Shirley saw her as nervous, quick-tempered, and immature. To make matters even more challenging, Sandra had multiple children, which only added to the instability of their home. Shirley had a history of violent incidents, some of which left lasting consequences. One of the most notable was when she attacked a teacher with a broken bottle, leaving him with facial injuries. She later claimed that she had acted in defense of her brother, alleging that the teacher had mistreated him. Another incident involved the father of a child who had previous conflicts with her younger brother. In a heated confrontation, Shirley cut the man's hand, but perhaps the most shocking event occurred during a fight with her own father. She sliced off part of his ear. She later justified her actions, saying she had endured years of physical abuse, including punches, kicks, and other violent treatment at his hands. At the time, she was still a minor, and with her mother's support, she reported the incidents to the authorities. As Shirley grew older, she blossomed into an eye-catching young woman with a slender figure. She loved to showcase. She was passionate about reggaeton dancing, makeup, tattoos, and photography. Socializing was one of her favorite pastimes, and she thrived in the company of friends. However, living in one of Lima's most dangerous districts, she became involved with a feared criminal group known as Los Diabolicos. Within their ranks, she earned the nickname La Gata due to her striking, almond-shaped eyes and her fearless attitude. By 2012, at just 16 years old, Shirley faced a traumatic experience. While waiting at a bus stop, a man abused her, She was approached by a stranger who persistently asked for her phone number. When she ignored him, the man used his strength to restrain her, dragging her toward a nearby staircase. There, he forcibly touched her and attempted to remove her pants, but Shirley fought back fiercely, preventing the assault. Frustrated, the attackers stole her phone instead. In a moment of distraction, she managed to escape and noticed him entering a nearby house. Wasting no time, she sought help from the police, reporting both the assault and the theft. By the 16th of October, 2013, Shirley's life had already taken a darker turn. She was arrested for stealing more than 300 souls, around $80 in valuables from a restaurant. When police searched her, they found a knife. At just 18, Shirley had plunged into a reckless lifestyle filled with crime, banned substance, and alcohol. On May 2, 2014, she was arrested again, this time for assaulting a night security guard. Authorities also discovered 9 packets of marijuana and a pipe coated with industrial adhesive used for inhalation. Cheap and toxic, the glue-like substance gave users a brief high and dulled hunger, selling on the streets for as little as 6 Peruvian soles, about $1.70. Shirley often drifted through nights in rundown motels with casual lovers, sinking deeper into chaos. By the 25th of October, 2017, at 22 years old, Shirley was living off sex work and heavy substance abuse. That morning, she woke up next to a 40-year-old shoe store owner with whom she occasionally had paid encounters. The night before, they had checked into the Hotel Universo, a cheap downtown lodging house. At dawn, the man left in a hurry, forgetting his fully loaded pistol with 12 bullets in a dresser drawer. Shirley, always quick to search her surroundings, found the weapon and didn't think twice. She took it. By the time the man returned to retrieve it, both Shirley and the gun were gone. Still restless and eager to continue the party, Shirley goes in search of Francisco Alway Carrillo, a 31-year-old motorbike taxi driver with whom she had an unstable relationship. Francisco was resting at home when Shirley called to him from the street, persuading him to come out. Soon after, the two were riding his moto-taxi to a liquor shop to buy rum. Along the way, they ran into another moto-taxi driver, an acquaintance of Francisco. When offered a drink, the man refused, but his teasing remarks toward Shirley quickly escalated the tension. Irritated, Shirley reached into her bag, pulled out the pistol, and aimed it at him. The gun jammed. She threw it down. The magazine slipped out, and when she picked it back up, she fired twice. Both shots missed. Startled, the man fled, yelling at her to stop. Francisco thought it was a joke and kept driving. A few blocks later, Shirley spotted an old friend, Diego Alex Marticorena, known as Chambo, a 21-year-old aspiring DJ and rapper who performed on buses and in small clubs. She asked Francisco to stop so she could greet him. Chambo, friendly but flirtatious, began complimenting Shirley in a way that irritated her. She told him she wasn't interested, but he lingered. When he asked Francisco for a cup to share a drink, Francisco, annoyed by his persistence, told him to leave. Insults flew. Tempers boiled over. Soon, Francisco and Chambo were wrestling on the ground. In the chaos, Shirley pulled out the pistol once more. She later claimed she only fired to break up the fight, not to hit anyone. But the bullets struck Chambo in the chest. He collapsed instantly, still clutching the notebook filled with his song lyrics. His life ended there on the pavement, with 2 gunshot wounds. Panicked but determined, Shirley grabbed Francisco's hand and urged him to leave. She told him she needed money, leading him to her home. When her brother didn't answer the door, Shirley fired 2 warning shots into the air. Moments later, the 20-year-old appeared and handed her 100 soles. At first, Shirley and Francisco planned to check into a hostel, as they often did, but Shirley suddenly changed her mind. She was hungry. Instead, they stayed within familiar streets and made their way to Santa Rosa Avenue, a stretch known for its Chinese Peruvian chifa restaurants, by 1 o'clock am. On the 26th of October, 2017, Shirley and Francisco walked into Alexandra Chifa and ordered shofa, the classic fried rice dish. They even asked for an extra plate to share, but after barely touching the food, they stood up to leave. At the door, Dolminga, one of the owners, stopped them. The bill was only 6 soles. She grabbed Shirley's arm and locked the door. Her husband, Freddy Marcus Elias, the restaurant's cook, came forward to remind them, politely, that they needed to pay. Shirley flatly refused, arguing the shofa didn't have enough chicken. Freddy calmly explained that what she wanted was a special order, but before he could finish, Shirley reached into her bag. For a second, it looked like she was pulling out money. Instead, she drew the pistol. Without saying a word, she fired a single shot into Freddy's head. The bullet went straight through him, striking the wall. Freddy collapsed instantly. Shirley and Francisco turned the weapon on the rest of the diners, warning them not to move. Then, as if nothing had happened, they walked out into the night. Instead of fleeing or hiding, they went to a bar to keep drinking. Freddy never made it to the hospital alive. At just 27 years old, he left behind his wife, their 8-year-old daughter, and the small family business he had worked so hard to build. By 5 o'clock am, Shirley and Francisco checked into Hostel El Dolar. 2 hours later, while Shirley slept, Francisco slipped out. By 9:30 a.m., police arrested Shirley as she stepped outside the hostel, betrayed by the very man she thought was her partner. Francisco, it turned out, had gone straight to the station to confess, hoping to save himself. He too was arrested once police confirmed his criminal record for aggravated robbery. In interrogation, their contrasts were stark. Francisco was nervous, hesitant. Shirley, in chilling calm, described the shootings in detail. She claimed not to remember why she acted that way. Blaming intoxication. Asked if she felt remorse, she simply said, no. She called Chambo's death just a game, insisted she had been messing around, and described the moment as if she were in a trance. On Freddy's murder, she was even colder. She said it was all a blur, that she didn't know if she regretted it, because she had never met him. When asked what she would say to Freddy's family, her answer was cruel. Their son was drunk. What unsettled investigators most was her indifference. She laughed at Francisco for being scared, demanded special meals from police, and even bragged about firing 6 bullets, carefully counting those that remained. Authorities concluded that, had she not been caught, Shirley would have continued her violent spree. The evidence was overwhelming. Within days, both Shirley and Francisco were formally charged and placed in preventive detention. At the preliminary hearing, which lasted 3 hours, the judge ordered them held for 9 months while prosecutors built their case, later extended until trial. Freddy's family attended, demanding that the court acknowledge Shirley's full awareness at the time of the crime. They feared her claims of memory loss would be used as a defense. Witnesses from the restaurant confirmed what the family already knew. Neither Shirley nor Francisco seemed drunk that night. If they had, the owners would have demanded payment up front, as they always did with visibly intoxicated customers. A year later, in October 2018, Shirley Silva stood before the court via video conference from prison. At the start, judges offered her the option of an expedited trial, plead guilty in exchange for a lighter sentence. Shirley accepted. Calmly, she admitted her guilt and took full responsibility for every charge. But the most chilling part of the hearing wasn't her confession. It was the psychological report. Experts diagnosed Shirley with a severe conduct disorder, a profile consistent with psychopathy. The evaluation described her as manipulative, incapable of guilt, unable to distinguish right from wrong, and obsessed with notoriety. For her, the media coverage was fuel, giving her the twisted recognition she craved. Toxicology tests ruled out any intoxication that night. That detail was crucial. It meant her charges were elevated from manslaughter to aggravated homicide. Intent to kill, the harshest category. Shirley Silva was convicted of 2 counts of aggravated homicide. Freddy Marcos Elias and Diego Alex Marticorena Chombo. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison and ordered to pay financial restitution to the victims' families. She is expected to be released as early as October 2043. Francisco, her partner that night, was sentenced for aiding and abetting and for failing to help a person in danger. His case drew little attention, overshadowed by Shirley's notoriety. But the story didn't end there. Months later, Shirley's own mother was caught sneaking a cell phone into prison for her daughter. And not long after, Shirley attempted an escape with other high-risk inmates. Authorities discovered blueprints of the prison with multiple escape routes. The plan failed, and she was swiftly transferred to a maximum security facility, even behind bars. Shirley showed no remorse. On Facebook, she defiantly wrote that she would come back, stronger than ever. Online, her case has become the subject of bizarre memes and fan pages. Shockingly, she even attracted admirers, men praising her looks while ignoring her crimes. For the families of Freddy and Chombo, the memes and admiration were another wound. They had demanded the maximum sentence of 35 years. Instead, they were left with the haunting truth. Their loved ones were gone, while Shirley, unrepentant, had become a morbid kind of celebrity. And that's the tragic legacy of La Gata. A life of banned substance, violence, and chaos that left behind death, grief, and unanswered questions about a society that sometimes glorifies the criminal more than it mourns the victims. Jennifer Rothwell first met Bo Rothwell in 2010, when they were both studying chemical engineering at the University of Missouri-Columbia. They were assigned to work together in the lab, and their shared interest in academics quickly developed into a deeper relationship. Jennifer was drawn to Bo's intelligence and calm demeanor. He has a different style from other students, more serious about looking towards the future. Over time, the two realized they had more in common than just their love of engineering. Bo enjoys playing games, has a passion for solving problems, and shares the same career aspirations as Jennifer. Their conversations often revolved around their dreams for the future, and their friendship quickly turned into love. What made their relationship special was their shared desire to have a family. Jennifer had always dreamed of becoming a mother, and Bo frequently expressed his wish to be a father, which helped Jennifer envision their future children together. To those around them, they seemed like the ideal couple, supporting each other and grounded in shared values and academic success. They were dedicated students who worked well together, impressing their professors. Their friends recognized them as best friends who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. As their relationship deepened throughout college, it became clear that they were headed toward marriage. In 2013, they graduated with their degrees in chemical engineering, ready to begin their professional lives together. After graduation, Jennifer and Bo chose to move to the St. Louis area for job opportunities. Jennifer found work as a chemical engineer at MEC, Inc., a company that had recently transitioned from a Monsanto subsidiary to a DuPont entity. Her colleagues quickly recognized her intelligence and friendly nature, and she thrived in her new role, forming strong connections with her coworkers. Bo also secured a job in the St. Louis area, and together, they appeared to be building the life they had always envisioned. In 2015, after years of planning, Jennifer and Bo celebrated their love with a wedding in St. Louis County. Their special day was filled with joy and excitement for their future together. They moved into a lovely home on North Winds Drive, symbolizing their success and commitment to each other. Jennifer took pride in their home and enjoyed working on renovation projects with Bo, believing they were creating something meaningful together. Continually excelling in her career at DuPont, Jennifer earned the respect of her colleagues through her strong work ethic and professional relationships. She was in daily contact with her family and friends, so when she was absent, people realized something was wrong. In the fall of 2018, Jennifer and Bo were excited about the possibility of getting pregnant. Unfortunately, what should have been a joyful experience quickly turned stressful. Jennifer was diagnosed with endometriosis, which complicated their journey to conceive. They needed to carefully track her ovulation and body temperature, transforming what was once a personal and intimate process into a strict routine. The spontaneity and romance that had once defined their relationship began to dwindle as they concentrated on the goal of pregnancy. As months passed without success, the pressure on their marriage became more pronounced. Jennifer remained dedicated to their dream of starting a family, but the ongoing setbacks and medical issues took a toll on her. Bo appeared to become more distant and less involved, leaving Jennifer feeling alone and frustrated. She became increasingly uneasy as she observed changes in her husband's behavior and attitude toward their shared dreams. In June 2019, while Jennifer was unaware, Bo made a choice that would ultimately lead to the downfall of their marriage and endanger Jennifer's life. Even as they were trying to conceive a child, Bo began an affair with another woman. He created a secret Facebook account under the name Chef Boer to communicate with his mistress. Carefully concealing his actions from Jennifer and everyone else around them, this affair betrayed everything Jennifer believed about their marriage. While she remained hopeful and focused on starting their family, Bo was leading a double life that shattered their relationship. Jennifer trusted her husband completely and never suspected he was capable of such betrayal. She firmly believed their marriage was strong and that they could overcome their fertility struggles together. Throughout the summer and early fall of 2019, Bo continued the affair while pretending to be a loving husband. He exchanged intimate messages with his mistress, professing his love for her and sharing his frustrations about his marriage to Jennifer. The mistress became increasingly significant to him, and he found himself wishing to be with her instead of honoring his commitments to his wife. In their conversations, Bo expressed his deep dissatisfaction with his marriage, stating that being intimate with Jennifer felt like a chore. Their relationship had lost its spark, and he had been contemplating divorce for months. These messages depicted a man who had emotionally distanced himself from his marriage while still pretending to be a devoted husband. On October 26, 2019, Jennifer's life took what she believed was a positive turn. She texted Bo about taking a pregnancy test, and later that evening, while waiting for a pizza delivery, she revealed that she was pregnant. Bo later testified that he was so shocked by the news he almost dropped the pizza. This announcement should have been a moment of joy for them, who had been trying so hard to conceive. However, it causes a crisis for Bo, who has been involved with another woman and is planning to leave Jennifer. The following day, October 27, Bo tried to end the affair. He messaged his mistress, saying he thought he would have had the courage to go through with a divorce by now. But the pregnancy changed everything. When she asked how long he had been considering divorce, he estimated it had been about 2 to 3 months, revealing he had been planning to leave Jennifer even before the affair started. However, the breakup with his mistress was short-lived. Just 2 days later, on October 29, Bo resumed contact with her. She told him she missed him, and he explained that he tried to end their relationship because Jennifer was pregnant. He told his mistress that he wanted to be with her instead of his wife, setting the stage for what would become a deadly decision. Bo then revealed that he wanted to be with her instead of his wife, setting the stage for a critical decision that would have serious consequences. On October 30, 2019, Bo and his mistress exchanged messages that would later serve as evidence of premeditated intent in his murder trial. In their discussions on Facebook, Bo outlined 3 potential paths for their relationship. The first option was to end things and cut off all contact to move on. The second option involved Bo telling Jennifer about the affair and pursuing a divorce, though he recognized this would be financially burdensome, especially while raising a child and starting fresh with his mistress. The third option was to wait and monitor the pregnancy. If there were complications, such as a miscarriage, He would then leave Jennifer and be with his mistress. When asked which option he preferred, Bo indicated he favored the third option, describing it as selfish. The prosecution later argued that Bo's use of the word something in this context suggested he was already contemplating murder as a way out. During this time, Jennifer completely trusted her husband, Bo, unaware that he was envisioning a future without her. Shortly after, Bo and his mistress agreed on the third option, but with a critical condition: if Jennifer's pregnancy progressed without any issues, they would revert to the first option and end their relationship. This agreement created a timeline for Bo, who hoped for a miscarriage or intended to cause a situation that would free him from marriage. Despite these troubling discussions with his mistress, Bo continued to maintain the facade of a supportive husband-to-be for Jennifer. They talked about nursery designs, health insurance for the baby, and even created a calendar to track the pregnancy. Bo later testified that he became emotional while expressing excitement about having a child, but evidence indicated these were merely acts to preserve his appearance. He and his mistress continued to text each other until early November 2019, and on November 1, they met for an intimate encounter, after which Bo sent her messages about how great it felt to be close to her. Their affair was ongoing, even as Jennifer was preparing for their baby's arrival, blind to her husband's disloyalty. On November 4, Jennifer began to worry about Bo's behavior. She searched online for information about her husband's indifference during her pregnancy and what she should expect. This revealed her suspicions that there were problems in their marriage, although she did not yet understand the extent of Bo's infidelity. Her worries intensified as she noticed Bo being distant and disengaged from her pregnancy. While she eagerly anticipated becoming a mother, Bo seemed to be merely going through the motions without true excitement. Jennifer couldn't understand why her husband was not as enthusiastic about their long-awaited baby. In the days leading up to Jennifer's death, Bo engaged in routine activities that concealed his intentions. On November 9, only 2 days prior to her murder, they participated in a fundraiser for the Southside Early Childhood Center at St. Mary's High School. To those who observed them that evening, they appeared to be a happy couple looking forward to their future. On November 11, 2019, Jennifer woke up without knowing it would be her last day alive. The morning began as usual, with both Jennifer and Bo going to work. Throughout the day, Jennifer texted Bo about insurance benefits for their baby, discussing practical aspects of their pregnancy. Her messages reflected her excitement and concern for ensuring proper coverage for their child. Bo returned home that evening as usual. When Jennifer arrived at around 5:15 p.m., they settled in to watch Netflix before heading to the kitchen to make dinner. During this seemingly mundane time, Bo decided to tell Jennifer about his affair, claiming he wanted to salvage part of their marriage. According to his testimony, he indicated to Jennifer that he had something important to confess, revealing that he had been unfaithful. Jennifer immediately reacted strongly, demanding to know the other woman's identity. She expressed her shock and betrayal through anger and verbal abuse. Bo refused to disclose his mistress's name, escalating Jennifer's frustration and desperate need for answers. As the argument intensified, Jennifer revealed that she had also been having an affair and suggested that the baby might not be Bo's. It remains unclear if her claim was true or an attempt to retaliate for Bo's betrayal. Bo later testified that her words filled him with rage. In a moment of violence, Bo stood up from the kitchen table, noticed a mallet he had used for hanging decorations, and struck Jennifer in the side of the head while she was still sitting. The scene quickly became horrific as Jennifer stumbled from her chair. Trying to escape to the garage, Bo followed her and, in what he described as a moment of passion, struck her again with the mallet, causing a severe injury that led her to fall down the basement stairs. Jennifer fought for her life, but her injuries were too severe. Bo claimed he tried to wake her, but she would not respond. The woman who had trusted him entirely and built a life with him lay dead on their basement floor, overwhelmed by shock and horror at his actions. Bo entered panic mode. Instead of seeking help or taking responsibility, he began planning to cover up the crime. Believing he needed to hide what he had done, His immediate goal was to clean up the large amounts of blood from Jennifer's injuries. The basement carpet was soaked, and blood had seeped into the padding and concrete below, creating a scene that would later shock crime scene investigators. Around 2:00 a.m. on the 12th of November, Bo decided to remove Jennifer's body from their home. He wrapped her in a tarp and placed her in the bed of his 2015 GMC Canyon pickup truck. He stripped her of her clothes and covered her head with a plastic bag, securing it with duct tape. He then drove her naked body to a secluded wooded area near Troy, Missouri, which is about 45 minutes from their home in Lincoln County. He left her in the grass and concealed her with shrubs and branches to try to hide the evidence. After disposing of her body, he drove to a business without security cameras and threw away the cleaning supplies and Jennifer's clothes in a dumpster. On the morning of the 12th of November, 2019, Jennifer was due at work but never showed up. Her colleagues at DuPont became worried when she failed to arrive, especially given her dependable nature and regular communication. When they couldn't reach her, concern grew that something was seriously wrong. Meanwhile, Bo, pretending to be the worried husband, called 911 at 9:44 p.m. that evening to report Jennifer missing, stating that he last saw her that morning as she left for work. His performance was convincing enough to prompt a large search for Jennifer. Before his arrest, he even posted on Facebook, asking for help finding her. In the post, he said, "Some people may have heard that his wife, Jennifer, went missing that night. He has filed a police report, and the search is ongoing. He is keen for anyone with information to get in touch." Jennifer's family has also offered a $25,000 reward for any information that leads to her disappearance. Investigators quickly grew suspicious of Bo's story. Surveillance footage showed him purchasing cleaning supplies, bleach, carpet cleaner, and gloves on the 11th of November, despite a severe snowstorm that made driving dangerous. This contradicted Bo's claim that he had stayed home with Jennifer all night. When police obtained a search warrant for their home on the 13th of November, they found significant evidence, leading to Bo's arrest. They discovered wet carpet soaked in bleach and large blood stains on the carpet and the pad beneath it. The basement reeked of bleach and cleaning products, and red stains were visible at the base of the basement steps. Additionally, investigators found damaged drywall containing human hair samples. Despite Bo's apparent attempt to clean the scene using a fan and opening windows, DNA tests matched the blood found in the house to Jennifer's parents, confirming it was Jennifer's. In their garage at home, the police found Bo's pickup truck, which also emitted a strong smell of bleach from the covered bed. The evidence indicated that violent acts occurred in the home and that someone had tried hard to cover them up. Bo Rothwell was arrested on the 13th of November, 2019, and charged with second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. Exposing the extent of his deception and calculated actions, detectives uncovered his secret Facebook account, revealing messages with his mistress that highlighted his motives and planning. After the murder, Bo drove Jennifer's car to a roadside on Olive Boulevard, staged it to look like an accident, walked home, and went to work, maintaining a facade of normalcy while his wife's body lay hidden in the woods. Data from Bo's phone showed he frequently called an unknown number, later identified as belonging to his mistress. When she saw news about Jennifer's disappearance, she came forward with the flirty messages she had exchanged with Bo. These messages spanned several months, including discussions on the day of Jennifer's murder. The morning after killing his wife, Bo texted his mistress about having trouble sleeping due to a stomach bug. Continuing their relationship, while search efforts for Jennifer were underway, on the 18th of November, about a week after Jennifer's disappearance, Bo, through his attorney, led investigators to her body found in a wooded area off Highway 61 in Lincoln County, confirming suspicions that he had murdered her. On the 28th of April, 2022, after several hours of deliberation, the jury found Bo Rothwell guilty of first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and abandonment of a corpse. Then, on the 8th of July, 2022, He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing hearing, Jennifer's mother, Robin Funhausen, spoke via video about her profound loss. She choked up and said that Jennifer had been a light in their lives. She also said that Jennifer would never have the joy of holding her child in her arms. Bo, who caused this pain, expressed his remorse to Jennifer's family, saying that no words could express their sadness and that he thinks of Jennifer every day. However, his apologies cannot ease the pain he has caused, nor can they bring back Jennifer, who trusted and loved him. Alexandra Morgan was a single mother living in Willsley Pound, Cranbrook, Kent, with her two children, aged 4 and 11. She had no contact with their fathers, making it challenging for her to raise them alone. Alexandra, described as energetic and ambitious, worked as a dog groomer and was dedicated to providing a better life for her children. On November 13, 2021, she told her parents she was going on a spa vacation with friends and left her children in their care, promising to return in 3 days. On November 17, her parents grew worried when she didn't return and didn't answer their calls or texts, which was unusual for her. After trying to locate her without success, they contacted the police. The Kent police found her disappearance suspicious and began investigating it as a possible crime. Initially, they focused on finding out which spa she intended to visit and who her friends were. The police obtained surveillance footage from a gas station in Cranbrook, which was the last known location of Alexandra. She was seen there on the morning of November 14, where she refueled her white Mini Cooper, purchased gas, and bought a coffee and a snack. The gas station manager, Rose Macaulay, who had known Alexandra for 17 years, described her as looking particularly well presented that day. Rose expressed concern over Alexandra's unexplained absence, saying that she had tried to search for Alexandra's car to no avail. Detectives interviewing Alexandra's friends discovered that in 2018, she had posted about a stalker on social media. In a 2019 message, she addressed the stalker directly, accusing them of following her online and warning them to stop. This raised questions for investigators about whether these encounters were related to her disappearance. A police spokesperson stated it was out of character for Alexandra not to contact her family and indicated the case was being treated as a potential murder. They urged anyone with information about Alexandra or her car to reach out. Alexandra is about 5 feet 6 inches tall and has a slim build. She has shoulder-length brown hair and was wearing a knee-length green quilted jacket, a black top, ripped blue jeans and knee-high black boots. She was also wearing a silver necklace when she was last seen. Although many individuals go missing without a trace, Alexandra left behind a digital footprint that eventually helped police piece together her story. This revealed shocking secrets about her life. To improve her finances, Alexandra worked as an escort, advertising her services online, a fact that her family and friends were completely unaware of. Women in this line of work are particularly vulnerable, as they may encounter clients who are either harmless or dangerous. Investigators found that Alexandra arranged a meeting with her regular client just before her disappearance and subsequently arrested him. Unfortunately, police confirmed that Alexandra was no longer alive. The arrested man, Mark Brown, a construction worker, was married and had a son. His family had no idea that he was living a double life. Before her disappearance, Alexandra had met Mark several times. Sussex police revealed that he once gifted her a Mini Cooper. Their first meeting occurred on the 8th of June, 2021, after Mark found her on an adult website at her home in Sissinghurst, near Cranbrook, Kent. The meeting went well, and they continued seeing each other occasionally. Their second meeting took place on the 21st of June at Little Bridge Farm near Hastings, Kent, which Mark had rented for meeting women and other activities. Over August and September, they met 7 more times, and Alexandra was unaware that she was becoming increasingly entangled in a dangerous situation. On the 23rd of October, 2021, Mark texted her about a risk-free business transaction involving $47,000 for 35 days at a hotel, where he would provide a new ID, a car, and spending money. All he asked was for her to step outside for a cigarette, pay cash, and buy some items. Alexandra's online searches after receiving this proposal highlighted her desire to improve her children's lives. She searched for terms like minimum deposit for a house 2021 and other related queries, indicating her intention to start new businesses with the money she would earn. Searches included how much can you make opening a sunbed business in the UK, and how much tax will I have to pay on $100,000. When Alexandra told her parents she was going to a spa with friends, she actually planned to meet Mark at the farm. She left her home on the 14th of November, and CCTV footage captured her buying gas in Cranbrook at 7:20 a.m., arriving at Little Bridge Farm around 8 o'clock a.m. On the 17th of November, 3 days later, Mark moved Alexandra's car to Holmhurst Lane in St. Leonard's after replacing its license plate with a fake one. Alexandra's mother reported her missing on the 18th of November when she failed to pick up her children and stopped responding to calls and messages. On the 23rd of November, police discovered CCTV footage showing Alexandra's car following Mark's Jaguar toward Little Bridge Farm. Kent police blocked access to the farm and began questioning Mark. Although he admitted to meeting Alexandra, he claimed she left after 45 minutes and allowed police to take his fingerprints and DNA sample. 2 days later, on the 25th of November, Mark was arrested as the main suspect in Alexandra Morgan's case. Before further details about Alexandra's fate, it's important to revisit a time when she was unaware of Mark. Leah Ware, a 33 years old, mother of 3, did not have custody of her children. She loves animals and cares for a horse, 3 goats and 2 dogs, a mastiff named Duke and a Pomeranian named Lady. She met Mark on March 2018, through an escort website where he also met Alexandra. By late 2018, Mark and Leah began dating and eventually rented an apartment together. When their lease ended 6 months later, Leah moved into a shipping container on Mark's property at Little Bridge Farm. Mark described their relationship as tumultuous. Given Leah's chaotic lifestyle, she received weekly benefit payments, which Mark often withdrew for her. Although Leah had a history of substance use and mental health challenges, many people noted that she was making efforts to gain custody of her children. Mark and Leah had a 3-year relationship before she vanished without a trace. On the evening of May 5, 2021, Leah spent time with her friend, Jack Tyler, who had a criminal record for dealing in banned substances. They used banned substances together that night, and it was the last time anyone saw Leah. The last call from her phone was made on May 7 at 8:55 a.m., and authorities believe she died on that day. 2 weeks later, Mark returned to the dating site where he met Leah, and on June 8, 2021, he met Alexandra for the first time. Their meeting went well, and she found him to be a reasonable and generous person, unaware that Leah had disappeared just a month earlier. During the investigation, detectives discovered disturbing messages from Mark sent to his high school girlfriend just 5 days after he met Alexandra. These messages referenced Leah and hinted at a darker truth. In the messages, Mark mentioned that he was going to be very careful with his words and that something had happened again not long ago. He described an unpleasant experience involving disposing of something, mentioning an old oil drum and 5 liters of diesel, suggesting that not much was left afterwards. He indicated that it got very hot and almost glowed white. Mark expressed that the things he had done weighed heavily on his heart, head, and soul, referring to himself as a psychopath with a conscience in a somewhat ironic manner. This led investigators to suspect that Mark might have harmed Alexandra as well, and that Leah was not his only victim. A spokesperson for Sussex Police's major crime team stated that despite thorough investigations, they had yet to find Leah or her remains, and were asking the public for help after Mark's arrest on November 25, 2021. The police searched his farm and discovered a barrel that appeared to have been used to burn something. Experts later identified the contents as the remains of Alexandra Morgan. Neil Kimber from Kent Police and Andy Wilston from Sussex Police have sent their condolences to Alexandra's family and Leah's family. They said that although Alexandra's body has been found, Leah is still missing and inquiries are ongoing. Leah is described as a white female, 60 meters tall, of slim build, with long black hair and blue eyes. She may also have a dragon tattoo on her right leg and a Chinese character tattoo on her right hip. The search at Mark's farm lasted about a month and concluded on January 7, 2022. In the pond, police discovered the bones of a Pomeranian with weights tied to its collar, believed to be Leah's dog, which Mark had cruelly disposed of after her death. Despite not finding Leah's remains, Mark was charged with her murder on February 1, 2022. Following earlier charges related to Alexandra, during police questioning, Mark denied wrongdoing. But when confronted with evidence of how he disposed of Alexandra's body, he admitted she had died, claiming it was an accident. Mark Brown's trial began on October 17, 2022. New details emerged during the sessions, revealing that Mark had been withdrawing money from Leah's bank account after her disappearance. In the weeks following Leah's last known sighting, he regularly picked up her prescription medication and withdrew cash using her new bank card, which had been sent to his sister Cheryl's address. He would leave the cash and medication in a horse box. The prosecution presented evidence that Mark withdrew the maximum amount of $270 from Leah's account multiple times, significantly depleting her balance from over $2,700 to just $60. In July 2021, he withdrew $270 twice and subsequently transferred $270 to his own account. The prosecution underscored that the withdrawals persisted even after Leah went missing. The prosecuting attorney challenged Mark, linking him to Leah Ware's situation and questioning the timing of her death shortly after she received a new bank card. Mark responded that he didn't grasp the implications, asserting that he believed Leah was still alive. The prosecutor probed further, asking if Mark was exploiting Leah's financial situation, knowing she was in a desperate state. Mark expressed confusion over this line of questioning. Additionally, a friend of Leah mentioned during the trial that Leah had hoped Mark would leave his wife for her, which might have affected his choices. In the trial for Alexandra Morgan's death, Mark maintained that her death was accidental, claiming she slipped and fell, hitting her head in the workshop he rented at Little Bridge Farm. He recounted rushing to her aid and seeing a lot of blood, which led him to grab a towel to stem the bleeding. Although he moved her head to place the towel, this caused more blood loss. The prosecutor objected, stating it was clear Alexandra was in distress and in need of help when he first found her. Mark agreed, but said he was panicked and focused on stopping the bleeding and performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation after failing to find her pulse. Because he was worried about the time an ambulance would arrive, he decided not to call an ambulance immediately. After performing CPR and checking for breath, Mark believed Alexandra had died within 5 minutes. He took steps to prevent blood from leaking out of the workshop, stepped outside to vomit, and then retrieved his phone to call for emergency services. Eventually, he chose to hide what happened, wrapping Alexandra in a sleeping bag and placing a towel around her head to contain the bleeding. Mark admitted that he was in a precarious situation and viewed it as a serious mistake. Worrying about how to prove her death was accidental, Mark denied involvement in Leah Ware's disappearance, stating he believed she was alive, and maintained that Alexandra's death was an accident. However, Mark's boss, Alain Deas, testified that Mark had warned him the police might come for him. In a conversation on November 24, when asked what Mark might be arrested for, he mentioned a double murder, which could imply that Leah was deceased and raised doubts about the accidental nature of Alexandra's death. Mark denied ever stating double murder, insisting he simply mentioned a murder he feared he might be implicated in. Despite saying he wouldn't kill anyone, He admitted feeling differently, believing others wouldn't trust his claims of innocence. Both women, Alexandra and Leah, were cherished individuals with families and children. Tragically killed by a ruthless criminal, the jury learned about Leah and Alexandra's lives, including their struggles, relationships, and dreams. Throughout the murder trial, Mark attempted to tarnish their reputations. On December 1, 2022, a jury found Mark guilty on all counts. Judge Nicholas Hilliard described the case as extremely serious with devastating impacts on the families of the victims. He sentenced Mark Brown to life in prison and stated that the court would decide on the minimum term and whether he would ever be eligible for parole. The judge also mentioned that if Mark chose to reveal what he did with Leah Ware's body, it could influence his sentence. But Mark declined this chance. Before sentencing, Leah Ware's mother, Rebecca Martin, spoke, expressing her anguish over not knowing her daughter's fate. She highlighted how Mark had manipulated Leah for his own ends and then discarded her. Alexandra Morgan's parents also shared their thoughts, celebrating her lively spirit and determination to overcome challenges for her children. On January 13, 2023, Mark Brown received 2 life sentences, with a chance for parole in 49 years. Judge Nicholas Hilliard delivered the sentence in Mark's absence, as he refused to attend court and noted that no punishment could adequately reflect the lives lost or the suffering Mark caused. Mark was described as having no remorse for his actions. Mavis Kindness Nelson was a member of the indigenous population of the United States and lived on the Yakima Reservation in Washington state, a large area of 1.3 million acres home to over 30,000 Native Americans. Born and raised there, Mavis, like many of her people, faced a life that wasn't easy, yet she remained a kind and bright person, described as exceptionally positive and pleasant. Someone who would share her last piece of bread, even with strangers. The Nelsons were a large family, but Mavis shared a particularly close bond with her older sister, Ernestine Morning Owl. Around the age of 50, Mavis left the reservation and moved to Seattle after her mother's passing. Her sister and other family members remained on the reservation. In Seattle, she found a job as an administrator at a local housing complex run by an organization that provided temporary shelter to those in need. She quickly became known for her generous nature, often allowing even casual acquaintances to stay in her small apartment if they had nowhere else to go. Despite warnings that this behavior could lead to trouble, Mavis couldn't bring herself to refuse anyone in need. At the same time, she remained an independent and strong-willed woman. But unfortunately, her gullibility and naivety bordered on recklessness. In May 2022, at the age of 56, Mavis was still working and remained as kind-hearted as ever. Then, suddenly, at the end of May, she disappeared. There were no warning signs, no apparent reason. She simply stopped answering her phone, even though she had been in touch with her family almost every day, just to chat. For her loved ones, especially Ernestine, this was a shocking development. Everyone knew that the United States has deeply troubling statistics regarding missing Native Americans, particularly women. They disappear at 4 times the rate of white people and are far less likely to be found alive. These cases often receive less attention from law enforcement and criminals who kidnap, abuse, or murder. Native American women often face less severe punishments, sometimes even escaping justice altogether. When Mavis's family contacted law enforcement, they encountered the expected reaction: cold indifference. At first, they ignored the report, attempting to dismiss it by saying that Mavis was an adult woman who could go anywhere she pleased and wasn't obligated to notify anyone. Then, they cited the requirement to wait 2 days before officially considering someone missing. Only after that time did the police show any real interest in her disappearance, largely thanks to Ernestine's relentless pressure to take action. By this point, Mavis' entire family, friends, and colleagues were deeply worried. They tried to contact her constantly, but she ignored calls and messages on social media. This was completely out of character. She hadn't been to work for several days, a major cause for concern, as Mavis was very responsible and would never abandon her job without a good reason, and without notifying anyone. Ernestine displayed unwavering determination in urging the police to search for her younger sister. At times, she almost lost hope. However, the Nelson family was fortunate. Their persistence paid off. An experienced Seattle police detective named Josh Rury was assigned to the case. It was the first time he had investigated the disappearance of a Native American woman. From the outset, Detective Josh was moved by Ernestine's concern. She was persistent, articulate, and convinced him that something terrible had happened to Mavis. He later described her behavior as reflecting a deep-seated feeling that a tragedy had befallen her younger sister and that she would never see her alive again. The Nelson family told the detective that Mavis lived in a small studio apartment in Seattle. They also shared that she had a habit of helping those in need and would often invite strangers to her home for the night, even providing them with a place to stay for a few days. This was an alarming habit, and relatives repeatedly asked Mavis to stop, warning her it could end badly. However, she didn't listen, continued her volunteer work. No one could imagine anyone wishing harm upon Mavis. She was known for her kindness and responsiveness, which often bordered on naivety. The fate of Mavis remained a mystery, and there were still no grounds for issuing a search warrant for her property. The search for Mavis continued for several weeks, but yielded practically no valuable information. The worst fears of Ernestine and other family members began to materialize. Law enforcement agencies no longer expected to find Mavis alive. Too much time had passed. The critical 48-hour period had long ended, and there were still no calls from her phone, no use of her payment methods, and no signs of activity. However, Detective Josh continued to investigate. Almost a month later, the situation changed. On June 20, 2022, emergency services in a Seattle suburb received a call. An alarmed witness had found a suspicious garbage bag near the road. While walking along a path, the man noticed an unbearable smell of decomposition. He decided to investigate and found what appeared to be body parts. Fearing they were human, he called for help. Police arrived and began to inspect the area around the road. Further along the trail, they found 3 black bags. According to the witness, the bags appeared to have been thrown from the highway overpass below. One of the bags had burst open due to the strong impact of the fall. Inside, the police found organs resembling human organs. The other 2 bags contained body parts, arms, legs, a head, and the torso. All the remains were collected and sent to the county laboratory for forensic examination. After analysis, the forensic examiner determined the death to be a murder. However, there was very little information available. They could only determine the victim's gender. A woman, presumably between the ages of 15 and 60. No identification documents were found at the scene. The condition of the remains was deplorable due to the degree of decomposition. It was obvious that they had been lying in the bags for a long time. At the same time, there were few insects, suggesting that the victim had been dead for a long time in a closed room, and the remains had only recently been disposed of. The forensic expert found traces of older generation insect activity, indicating development over approximately a month. However, there were also fresh larvae that could have appeared no earlier than a day before the call to emergency services. According to the conclusion, the woman died due to multiple wounds inflicted by a cutting object. Most of the wounds were concentrated in the upper body, neck, and head. There were also defensive wounds. The exact number couldn't be determined due to the advanced decomposition, but it was clear that she had been attacked. She bled to death and was then dismembered much later. There were also signs that the victim had been repeatedly abused after her death. It was clear the victim was killed by a dangerous individual, possibly someone using banned substance or with a severe mental illness. This person posed a significant threat to the public and needed to be captured quickly. Besides the body parts, the bags also contained rubber gloves and a used condom. These items likely belonged to the killer and could provide crucial evidence. All items were sent to the lab for analysis. Subsequent examination revealed fingerprints and DNA samples of the perpetrator on the recovered items. Apparently, the deceased had been dead for over 2 weeks. Investigators estimated that the remains had been disposed of in an open area near the road, approximately a day prior to their discovery. The area's isolation meant the bags weren't found immediately. There were no residential buildings, shops, or factories nearby. Consequently, seeking witnesses proved fruitless. No one could provide a description of the vehicle the perpetrator used, rendering the review of camera footage at the nearest road junctions equally unhelpful. The overpass itself lacked camera surveillance, meaning the moment the bags were discarded from the car went unrecorded. The victim remained unidentified for some time until a caliber tattoo was observed on her arm. Following the official confirmation that her death was a homicide, a press conference was held. Police addressed the public and analyzed missing persons cases from the region over the preceding month. Upon seeing the report of an unidentified body, Ernestine Owl immediately contacted the detective who was investigating Mavis's disappearance. She reiterated that her younger sister had a caliber tattoo on her arm and inquired if the detective had seen the matching unidentified body. Because another station was handling the unidentified body incident, the detective was initially unaware of the discovery. After the call, Josh accompanied Ernestine to identify the woman. To spare her further distress, they only showed her the fragment of the arm bearing the tattoo. Ernestine confirmed that the location and design of the tattoo matched her sister. She also provided a DNA sample, which confirmed that the discovered remains belonged to the missing Mavis Nelson. The estimated timelines also aligned, despite extensive publicity. The exact circumstances of the crime remained unclear. Detective Josh took on the investigation with particular zeal. He felt deeply about the case, partly because he believed the law enforcement system unfairly treated Native Americans. He was appalled by the victim's suffering. The murder was exceptionally cruel, and the subsequent desecration of the body was inhumane. Therefore, investigators initially theorized that the motive was rooted in hatred, either specifically directed at Mavis or against Native Americans in general. The investigation focused on people who knew Mavis. Her older sister described Mavis as having a troubled and often lonely life. At the time of her death, she was in an unstable relationship with a man from a neighboring town. However, he was generally described as calm and seemingly incapable of such horrific acts. No one in Mavis's family could imagine why anyone would want to harm the kind-hearted Mavis. However, a new lead emerged. Before, Mavis had visited her boyfriend in the neighboring town. A serious conflict occurred during this visit, to the point where Mavis wanted to end the relationship. Ernestine provided all the information she had, including Mavis's boyfriend's address. Detective Josh interviewed neighbors, hoping to gather information about Mavis Nelson. Witnesses reported hearing a domestic disturbance on the day of Mavis's arrival. Many heard screams coming from the boyfriend's apartment, but the noise quickly subsided. After contacting local law enforcement, the detective learned that the incident had been documented. Concerned neighbors had called the police to report a domestic dispute involving the woman. The officers who arrived managed to calm both individuals down. Afterward, Mavis stated that she was going home to Seattle. Refusing to file an official statement against her boyfriend, she called a taxi and left. That appeared to be the end of the matter. Detective Josh then met with Mavis's boyfriend. The boyfriend claimed that he had overindulged in alcohol that evening and had a significant argument with Mavis. He stated that she left, declaring a breakup. After sobering up, he tried to contact her several times to ask for forgiveness, but without success. He assumed she simply didn't want to see him anymore. During his conversation with the detective, he behaved calmly and was willing to cooperate. Upon learning of Mavis's death, he even shed tears. At this point, the detective had no concrete evidence to implicate him. The detective collected DNA samples and fingerprints from the boyfriend. Before leaving, the next step was to compare these materials with the fluids found on Mavis's body. Following that, Detective Josh decided to obtain a warrant to search the studio apartment where Mavis lived, suspecting that the conflict might have continued there. Inside the apartment, the investigator found empty beer cans. Even though Mavis did not drink alcohol, her sister, Ernestine, confirmed that Mavis disliked beer and was meticulous about cleanliness, always cleaning up after guests. This suggested that a stranger had clearly been in her home before her disappearance. Because the perpetrator used rubber gloves, no fingerprints were found on the surfaces within the apartment. However, prints remained on the gloves and a condom found at the scene. The cans were collected in the hope of finding trace evidence. Testing revealed that none of the evidence matched the materials provided by Mavis's boyfriend. Removing him from the list of suspects, more data was needed, so Josh brought in other law enforcement agencies, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, to analyze every potential lead. The phone records proved especially valuable, examining conversations that Mavis made on the day of her death. The detective noticed that the same number appeared several times on the list. Notably, on the night she was supposed to drive home from a neighboring town, calls from this number suddenly stopped. Meanwhile, other relatives and friends only increased their efforts to contact her. It seemed that the caller clearly knew that Mavis would no longer be able to answer the phone. And this did not seem accidental. The phone number did not belong to any of the witnesses they had already interviewed. The detective assumed that the number could be associated with the criminal. Based on this assumption, a warrant was filed to investigate the phone number. This led the detective to the identity of the user, a young man named Charles Becker, 33. He immediately seemed like a promising suspect, as he was already known to law enforcement. Unfortunately, his DNA samples were not in the state databases. However, in 2015, Charles had been convicted in the death of his 4-month-old son. The child was found suffocated in the family's apartment, with a plastic clothing bag identified as the cause of death. During the autopsy, a piece of plastic was removed from the child's airway. The boy's death was ruled an accident, but following an investigation, his father was charged with second-degree manslaughter. In 2016, a jury found Charles guilty. However, the sentence was lenient, only 2 years in prison for such charges. Josh met with the new prime suspect, Charles Becker, who was reluctant to cooperate with the police. Despite this reluctance, Charles seemed to sympathize with the deceased, Mavis Nelson, and her family. Charles confirmed he knew Mavis and had communicated with her, as they had worked for some time at the same organization. Josh obtained fingerprints and a DNA sample from Charles for examination, after which he was released pending comparison with existing evidence. Crucially, valuable data was collected from rubber gloves found with Mavis's remains. These gloves contained DNA samples matching traces found on beer cans in Mavis's studio apartment. All the collected evidence pointed to Charles Becker. Detective Josh explained how he identified Charles, stating that Charles's name repeatedly surfaced during the investigation. Josh attempted to remain impartial, but almost all lines of inquiry converged on Charles, beginning with an unknown phone number traced back to him around the time of Mavis's murder. Charles Becker was brought in for questioning in early October 2022. Armed with this evidence, a 9-hour conversation ensued. Charles quickly admitted to having interacted with the 56-year-old Mavis Nelson, providing many details of the crime that only the actual killer could know. This information, though not published in official reports, precisely matched the criminologists' and detectives' reconstructed picture of the brutal murder. Charles Becker did not deny meeting Mavis on the night of her disappearance and spending a considerable amount of time in her apartment. He initially claimed they had consensual intimate relations. However, as the evidence against him mounted, he began changing his story, likely trying to mitigate his guilt. He introduced the idea of an accomplice. The final version of his story was as follows. Charles claimed he drank heavily after intimacy with Mavis and experienced a mental break, what he described as a clouding of reason. He then took a knife and stabbed her. After the murder, he alleged that the body was kept in a closet in the bedroom. He further claimed that he and his accomplice abused her body for almost 2 weeks before deciding to dispose of it. To avoid detection, they dismembered the body. Although Charles insisted that the accomplice did the dismembering and he only assisted, he never named this alleged accomplice. Josh believed the story about the second criminal was fabricated, and that all the crimes were committed by Charles alone. No evidence of an accomplice was found. No fingerprints. No DNA samples. Investigators learned that Charles Becker and Mavis met while Charles was staying at a temporary housing center where Mavis worked. He had been struggling with housing after his release from prison. Mavis, working at the front desk, became a potential source of help. According to information from mutual friends, they connected there. During interrogation, Charles avoided significant details. However, Ernestine believed Mavis would not have been in an intimate relationship with Charles. Mavis was much older and not inclined towards casual relationships. She may have simply been friendly and offered him a place to stay. They may have become friends after Mavis had a quarrel with her boyfriend, who lived in another city. Charles called her many times. They likely met, and she offered him shelter, even during interrogation. Charles vaguely alluded to Mavis's kindness toward him. Sadly, Mavis's simple kindness proved fatal. Mavis was buried next to her mother and one of her brothers in Yakama Nation in Klickitat County, Washington, the burial ground of the Yakama Nation. For many who knew Mavis well, the capture of her killer brought immense relief. Roxanne White, who befriended Mavis 10 years before the tragedy, described her as very kind and sympathetic. They met while living on the Yakama Reservation. During that time, Roxanne was experiencing personal problems and struggling to afford food. Mavis freely offered Roxanne food and a place to rest, despite not being wealthy herself, which cemented their friendship. There were many similar instances in Mavis's life. Along with other friends, Roxanne spoke to journalists, expressing her hope that the criminal would receive the most severe punishment possible. However, some familiar with the problems faced by Native Americans complained that the police are not always as zealous. Josh Rury, in particular, highlighted how some law enforcement agencies seem to turn a blind eye to such cases, resulting in a lack of urgency and underreporting of crimes. Native Americans are frequently incorrectly identified as white or Hispanic. Also, police reports usually don't include the person's tribal affiliation. These issues have led to a lack of trust in law enforcement among Native American communities. Some even suspect that police officers are involved in violence and human trafficking. Despite this negativity, Josh Rury believed that direct interaction with Mavis's family was necessary. He personally went to the Yakama Reservation to inform the deceased's relatives about the arrest of the criminal and to discuss issues related to the case with them. The detective's behavior was highly praised, especially by Mavis's older sister, Ernestine. The investigator established a connection with them, which is often lacking. Thanks to the full confession that Charles Becker gave, the jury decided to forego a full trial. The case was considered in 2023 under an abbreviated procedure, which avoided further emotional trauma for the Mavis family. As a result, Charles Becker was sentenced to 34 years in prison. He was found guilty of first-degree murder, false imprisonment, and abuse of a body. The prosecutor's office stated that the decision demonstrated their serious commitment to addressing the tragedy, as the killer received an extended sentence due, in part, to the abuse, which was considered an aggravating circumstance. Detective Josh Rury was present at the sentencing. He stated that he was especially sensitive to this crime, did not want to perpetuate the already disappointing tradition of unsolved cases, and made every possible effort to solve it as quickly as possible. He wanted not only to bring comfort to the Mavis family but also to remove a dangerous person from the streets, someone capable of not only killing but also committing even more heinous acts. Ernestine also traveled to Seattle, which was located several hours away from her home. She wanted to be present at the sentencing and personally see the killer who took the life of her beloved younger sister. For this event, she wrote a statement detailing how the loss of Mavis devastated her family. She described Mavis as a person who helped everyone in need. Charles Becker was once among those. She helped many times. But instead of reciprocating kindness, he took her life in the most despicable way. With justice for Mavis Nelson finally served, close family and community members wanted to ensure that her death was not in vain. They wanted to bring more attention to the Native American crisis, raising a new wave of discussions about the alarming number of people from the reservation who have disappeared or died in recent years. Their voices were heard. Weeks after the conviction, the State Department of Justice announced that it would send a team of investigators to the reservation to look into unsolved cases involving indigenous peoples of the United States. Matthew Taylor Coleman first met Abby through their shared Christian faith. Despite living hundreds of miles apart, Matthew in Santa Barbara, California, and Abby in Texas, they connected through church groups and started communicating regularly about their faith, dreams, and values. Matthew was drawn to Abby's sincere devotion to Christianity and her warm personality. He admired her commitment to living a Christ-centered life. Having grown up in a Christian household, faith was crucial to Matthew, and he appreciated that Abby felt the same. They found comfort in their shared beliefs and their common desire to serve God. Matthew is an avid surfer. Immersed in his love of the ocean and living his Christian faith, he attended Point Loma University, an evangelical Christian college in San Diego, where he studied history and was part of the surf team. After graduating, he earned a master's degree in Spanish from UC Santa Barbara. Eventually, Matthew decided to propose to Abby. Their relationship had mainly developed through phone calls, texts, and occasional visits. Given the distance, friends noted that their romance progressed quickly, but both were eager to begin their life together as husband and wife. On January 8, 2017, Matthew and Abby celebrated their love by getting married. Their special day was filled with joy, laughter, and a strong commitment to their beliefs. Shortly after their wedding, they settled in Santa Barbara, where Matthew felt most at home by the ocean. Matthew had made a name for himself in Santa Barbara's Christian surfing community. He founded Lovewater Surf School, offering surf lessons paired with Christian mentorship for young people. The school's motto, "For the love of surfing," embodied Matthew's belief in using his passion for the ocean to share his faith. Abby supported him in running the business, and together they aimed to create a ministry that positively impacted young lives. Those who knew Matthew recognized his dedication to faith. He served as the chapter leader for Christian Surfers United States Santa Barbara, mentoring local youth in surfing and Bible study. Colleagues described Matthew as caring and dedicated to helping children grow in their faith. His passion for service stemmed from his own experiences with Christian mentors, and he was committed to passing on that tradition of serving Jesus through love and action. From the outside, Matthew and Abby's life appeared perfect. In 2019, their happiness grew when their son Kaleo Coleman was born. Matthew was thrilled to become a father, frequently sharing his love for Kaleo on social media and his eagerness to teach him to surf one day. To Matthew, Kaleo represented everything he had hoped for: a loving family, a successful surfing ministry, and the chance to raise a child in the Christian faith that was so important to him. He viewed Kaleo as a blessing from God and wanted to guide him in faith and love. Matthew often looked forward to teaching Kaleo to surf and sharing the joy he found in both surfing and his relationship with Jesus. Those close to him observed his excitement about parenthood during this time. In late 2020, the Coleman family welcomed their second child, a daughter named Roxy Coleman. Matthew was overjoyed to have a daughter, seeing her birth as another blessing from God. On social media, he expressed that Roxy was born at a significant time in history and would symbolize a new beginning. As Matthew's surfing school prospered and parents sought outdoor activities for their children, he increasingly invested time in researching various topics online. Unfortunately, his research led him into online communities and conspiracy theories that gradually distorted his perception of reality. Initially, when he expressed interest in alternative viewpoints about political and social issues, it seemed harmless to friends and family. He would mention reading various theories, sometimes noting that while some seemed outlandish, they also had a certain logic to them. His wife, Abby, participated in some of this exploration as they both aimed to grasp the troubling societal changes they observed. As Matthew explored conspiracy communities further, his beliefs became more extreme and paranoid. He grew convinced that a secret group of powerful elites was orchestrating world events and harming innocent individuals, especially children. These views were fueled by QAnon theories. Over time, his interest in these theories intensified. He began recognizing supposed signs and connections everywhere, interpreting ordinary occurrences and social media posts as evidence of the conspiracy he believed was surrounding him. His growing paranoia alarmed those close to him. He started suspecting people in his life, including friends and church leaders, of being part of the conspiracy. According to Abby, he became increasingly convinced that individuals in their church community were involved in this broader plot. His paranoia extended to their social circle, where he began to see hidden messages in photographs and social media posts that he believed revealed people's true intentions. Matthew's behavior raised concerns among his friends and family, as he scrutinized social media images for hand gestures, symbols, or signs that he interpreted as indicators of evil disguised as good. He even believed that common gestures, such as peace signs, were signs of complicity in the conspiracy. This shift in mindset marked a dramatic departure from the loving and trusting person they once knew. As his beliefs grew more extreme, he began to experience what he described as visions and signs revealing critical information about the perceived conspiracy. These experiences were not recognized or understood by others, heightening his isolation and reinforcing his belief that he had access to special knowledge. By the summer of 2021, Matthew's mental state had deteriorated significantly, leading him to believe he was receiving direct messages from Q, the anonymous figure at the heart of the QAnon theories. He saw himself in a pivotal role, believing he was chosen to uncover the deceptions that blinded others and to take action to save humanity. Tragically, his paranoia began to focus on his own family, particularly Abby, whom he became convinced was compromised by the conspiracy and possessed what he called serpent DNA. Linking her to the dark forces he believed controlled the world. Matthew became convinced that his children, Kaleo and Roxy, had inherited serpent DNA, which he believed could turn them into monsters. This warped belief shifted his view of them from cherished gifts to potential threats to humanity. The once loving father, who cherished teaching Kaleo how to surf and celebrating Roxy's arrival, now saw them through a distorted and paranoid lens. His faith, which used to guide him positively, became corrupted by conspiracy theories, leading him to consider terrible actions. On the 7th of August, 2021, Matthew made a choice that would devastate many lives and shock the Santa Barbara community, which knew him as a nurturing teacher and father. Without sharing his true intentions with Abby, he took their 2-year-old son Kaleo and 10-month-old daughter Roxy and left their home in a family van. Abby thought they were going on a camping trip and did not suspect any danger at first. She reported Matthew's absence to the Santa Barbara police, noting her concern was mainly about not having the proper car seat for Roxy. She did not believe Matthew would harm their children. Unbeknownst to Abby, Matthew had already crossed a line in his mind. As he drove south toward the Mexican border, he believed he was on a mission to save the world from what he saw as monsters in his children. He reached Rosarito, Mexico, where surveillance footage showed him checking into a hotel with the kids, appearing like a normal family, a facade hiding the horrors to come. On the morning of the 9th of August, 2021, around 3 o'clock a.m., cameras recorded Matthew, leaving the hotel with Kaleo and Roxy. He went to a remote area and, in his disturbed state, thought killing them was his only way to prevent their future transformation into monsters. What followed was a tragic and incomprehensible act of violence using a spearfishing gun. He shot his children in an act of unimaginable cruelty. Kaleo, only 2 years old, did not die immediately. Matthew later confessed to having to reposition the spear to complete the act, injuring himself in the process. Roxy, an innocent baby who was 10 months old, was also killed with the same weapon. After the murders, Matthew moved their bodies about 30 yards from the road and tried to hide them in the brush. He disposed of the bloody weapon and his stained clothes nearby before returning to the hotel alone. Later, he checked out and drove back to the United States, leaving behind the bodies of his 2 innocent children in the Mexican countryside. At approximately 7:30 a.m. on August 9, 2021, a farm worker named Roberto Salinas Ramirez made a shocking discovery near his home at the Rancho El Descanso Agricultural Ranch. His son's dog was barking at something in the bushes. Prompting him to investigate, he found the lifeless bodies of 2 young children. Surrounded by a gruesome scene of blood, he quickly contacted Mexican authorities, who confirmed the tragic discovery. The children were later identified as Kaleo and Roxy Coleman. A blood-stained wooden stake, believed to be linked to the spearfishing gun used in the attack, was also found at the scene. The condition of the children's bodies indicated that this was a calculated and brutal act of violence, shocking both Mexican authorities and American investigators who later got involved. Meanwhile, in Santa Barbara, Abby was growing increasingly anxious about her husband and children. When Matthew failed to respond to her messages on August 8th, she filed a missing persons report with the Santa Barbara Police Department. Feeling a heightened sense of urgency, Abby worked with a police officer to use the Find My iPhone app to track Matthew's phone, which last pinged at a shopping mall in Rosarito, Mexico. This confirmed that he had crossed the border with the children, alarming both Abby and the police, as it indicated he had taken them to another country without warning. As the hours went by with no contact from Matthew, Abby's anxiety intensified, although she didn't believe he would harm Kaleo and Roxy. His sudden disappearance and refusal to communicate troubled her deeply. Recognizing that the case exceeded their jurisdiction, the Santa Barbara police contacted federal authorities, and the FBI became involved. They coordinated with U.S. Customs and Border Protection and Mexican law enforcement to locate Matthew and the children. The urgency was clear. 2 American children were missing in a foreign country with a father showing erratic behavior. On the afternoon of August 9, 2021, U.S. Customs agents at the Santa Cruz port of entry were on high alert for Matthew Coleman and his children, Kaleo and Roxy. When he attempted to return to the United States in his Mercedes Sprinter van, agents quickly realized he was alone. The children were not with him. Matthew was detained for questioning, and FBI agents arrived to interview him. What followed shocked even seasoned law enforcement officials. Instead of denying involvement, Matthew openly confessed to killing his children, doing so in a calm manner. During his interview, he explained his actions as influenced by conspiracy theories from QAnon and the Illuminati. He claimed to have received visions that revealed troubling information about his family. In his distorted belief, Matthew thought that his wife Abby carried serpent DNA, which he believed had been passed on to their children. He was convinced that if he didn't act, his children would grow into monsters. He told the FBI that killing Kaleo and Roxy was the only way to prevent the spread of evil he mistakenly believed they would unleash if they were allowed to live. When agents asked Matthew if he realized that his actions were wrong, he acknowledged that they were, but claimed he believed they were the only way to save the world. During his confession, he provided shocking details about the final moments of his children's lives. He admitted to using a weapon to attack both children after driving them to a remote area near Rancho del Cielo. He explained that 2-year-old Kaleo did not die immediately from the first shot, which forced him to twist the spear to ensure the killing, resulting in a cut on his own hand. Matthew's chilling account of the murders revealed a total detachment from reality. The man who had once celebrated his children as blessings was now rationalizing their deaths as a necessary action to avert a global disaster. His confession illustrated the depth of his delusions and how conspiracy theories had clouded his ability to separate reality from the paranoid fantasies that dominated his thoughts. After the murders, Matthew told investigators that he had moved Kaleo and Roxy's bodies into some brush about 30 yards from the road where the attacks had occurred. He then disposed of the bloody spear fishing gun and his stained clothing at a nearby spot before returning to the hotel alone. His calculated efforts to cover up the crime suggested that, despite claiming to act on divine visions, he realized his actions were criminal and needed to be hidden. As FBI agents processed Matthew's confession and collaborated with Mexican authorities, the full extent of the tragedy unfolded. The bodies found by Roberto were confirmed to be those of Kaleo and Roxy Coleman, validating the worst fears of those involved in the search. The investigation quickly transitioned from a missing persons case to a double homicide committed by the children's own father. Crime scene investigators from both the U.S. and Mexico meticulously gathered evidence from the horrific crime scene. They carefully documented the location where the children's bodies were discovered, collecting physical evidence, taking photographs, and gathering any materials that could shed light on what had happened. The spearfishing gun and blood-stained clothing that Matthew had disposed of were also recovered and preserved as evidence due to the international nature of the crime. Cooperation between multiple law enforcement agencies across both countries was necessary. Mexican authorities had jurisdiction over the location of the murders, while U.S. federal authorities were responsible for Matthew as an American citizen who committed crimes against other Americans abroad. This collaboration occurred smoothly, ensuring that justice would be sought for Kaleo and Roxy. As investigators probed deeper into Matthew's background and mental state prior to the murders, they uncovered a troubling pattern of growing paranoia and conspiracy-driven thinking. Search warrants for his electronic devices and social media accounts revealed how deeply he had become consumed by QAnon and other conspiracy theories in the months leading up to the crime. The news of the murders shocked the Santa Barbara community, where Matthew was known and respected as a surf instructor and Christian mentor. Parents who had trusted Matthew with their children at Lovewater Surf School struggled to understand how someone they viewed as a caring teacher could commit such unimaginable violence against his own children. Matthew Taylor Coleman was formally charged with 2 counts of foreign first-degree murder of United States nationals, which could result in the death penalty under federal law. In 2023, however, after a thorough psychiatric evaluation, U.S. District Judge Kathy Ann Bensavengo ruled that Matthew was not competent to stand trial. The judge determined that his mental illness prevented him from comprehending the legal proceedings. He was ordered to be committed to a secure federal medical facility for treatment. In February 2023, federal prosecutors decided not to pursue the death penalty against Matthew. Taking into account his mental illness and the complicated circumstances of his crimes, while Matthew is facing legal repercussions for his actions, his wife, Abby, is left to deal with the heartbreaking loss of their 2 children, who were taken from her through his violence. Abby's brother set up a GoFundMe campaign to help her with funeral costs, which raised over $115,000 from generous donors. Friends believe that Abby was completely unaware of Matthew's intentions when he left Santa Barbara with the children. The Santa Barbara community is still grappling with the shocking realization that someone they knew and trusted could commit such terrible acts. The Christian churches where Matthew was active are facing tough questions about whether they overlooked any warning signs. Local surf instructors expressed feelings of betrayal, with one stating that he would have trusted Matthew with his own children without a second thought. Currently, Matthew Taylor Coleman is in federal custody receiving psychiatric care. It remains uncertain whether he will ever be held fully accountable for his actions, but the legal system is striving for justice for Kaleo and Roxy Coleman. They express sadness while remembering Kaleo and Roxy, 2 innocent children whose lives were tragically cut short by the person who should have loved and protected them the most. On a March morning in a tranquil Michigan neighborhood, two men were engaged in a tense conversation inside a small mobile home. The situation seemed stable, but suddenly, things took a turn for the worse. Scott Amador was born on January 26, 1963, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the second largest city in the state. He grew up in a working-class family. His father, Frank Amador, worked as a truck driver, and his mother, Patricia Graves, was a homemaker. In 1968, when Scott was a baby, the family moved to Michigan. This move was followed by a difficult period. His parents divorced, and the children were separated. Scott and three of his brothers lived with their father, while the other siblings lived with their mother. This separation had a lasting impact on the family. As Scott entered his teens, he became very charismatic. He was friendly, kind, giving, and understanding, and he easily made friends. At 17, wanting more structure in his life, he left school and joined the Air Force. During this time, Scott told his family that he was attracted to men. His brother said that his family responded with love and acceptance, not disapproval. Scott served in the military for 3 to 4 years and was honorably discharged as a specialist. After leaving the service, Scott went back to Michigan and started working in telecommunications. However, he found the work dull and missed excitement. He then switched to bartending at a well-known gay club in the city, which was a better fit for his outgoing personality. He enjoyed the vibrant nightlife and became successful because he was enthusiastic and generous. He made many friends and earned respect in his community. However, what is less known is that Scott has been quietly battling banned, substance addiction, and emotional difficulties. He confronted these problems head-on by attending rehab several times. His friends recall him as funny, caring, and always willing to help. In particular, at a time when people harshly judged those with disease of the century, Scott invited them to live with him. This willingness to embrace new things eventually led to a special opportunity for him. Scott, a big fan of talk shows, saw an ad for The Jenny Jones Show. They were looking for people to reveal their secret same-sex crushes on television. Scott was excited by this opportunity to be on television and to share a secret of his own. He had a crush on his 24-year-old friend and neighbor, Jonathan Schmitz. Jonathan had even flirted with him a few times. Scott thought the show would be the ideal way to tell Jonathan how he felt. Jonathan, born the 18th of July, 1970, in Michigan, had a reputation among acquaintances as polite and charming. Yet, beneath that exterior lay a fragile, emotional state. He had a history of depression, substance abuse, and physical health issues compounded by a turbulent family background. Scott applied to be on the show and was invited to Chicago for taping after talking to the producers. He was thrilled and asked his friend Donna Riley to go with him. At the same time, The Jenny Jones Show contacted Jonathan, but they weren't entirely honest. They led him to believe that his secret admirer was a woman. Jonathan, who had recently ended a long relationship, thought it might be a former girlfriend or a new unknown admirer. On March 6, 1995, 32-year-old Scott went to the studio to record an episode called Secret Crushes. He didn't realize this day would be life-altering. During the taping, in front of a live audience, Scott confessed his attraction to Jonathan. He shared lighthearted fantasies, picturing them relaxing in a hammock at his house, enjoying champagne and whipped cream. Jonathan was backstage, not knowing who was talking or what they were saying. He then walked onto the stage and heard the announcement. Looking surprised, the audience laughed, but Jonathan seemed uncomfortable. He blushed, hid his face, and awkwardly told the cameras he was straight. 3 days after the taping of The Jenny Jones Show, on the morning of the 9th of March, 1995, events took a deadly turn. That day, Jonathan discovered a handwritten note left at the door of his home. The message is suggestive and is believed to be signed by Scott. Shortly after reading it, Jonathan drove to a bank and withdrew cash, before heading to a local gun store where he purchased a 12-gauge shotgun and a box of ammunition. Jonathan, armed and with a plan, drove to Scott's mobile home. Case records show that Jonathan confronted Scott about the note. Reports indicate Scott admitted to writing it. Jonathan said he had to return to his car because it was still running, but instead, he went to get a shotgun. He came back into the house, raised the shotgun, and shot Scott twice in the chest. Scott died instantly from these fatal wounds. Inside the residence at the time was Gail Clinton, one of Scott's housemates, who, horrified by what he had just witnessed, quickly dialed 911 to report the shooting and request help. Surprisingly, Jonathan also called the police himself, his voice shaking with emotion as he admitted to the killing. News of the incident spread rapidly, dominating headlines and television broadcasts. The combination of a sensational talk show segment and a sudden act of lethal violence made it a national story almost overnight. Police arrived at the crime scene within minutes. Scott's body lay lifeless, and officers wasted no time in taking Jonathan into custody. As the investigation started, the public wasn't just angry at the murderer. Many criticized the Jenny Jones show, claiming its producers contributed to the events that led to Scott's death. Under increasing pressure, the show released an official statement 6 days later. On March 15, 1995, at the beginning of that day's episode, Jenny Jones spoke directly to the audience. She expressed sorrow over the tragedy, but maintained that Scott's death was caused by the killer alone, not by the show. She also stated that Jonathan knew in advance that his secret admirer might be male or female, a claim Jonathan later disputed. Despite the statement, the debate over the show's responsibility intensified. The murder had not only claimed a life but had also sparked a national conversation about the ethics of televised entertainment, the manipulation of guests, and the consequences of turning private matters into public spectacle. After Scott Amador died, both families shared their thoughts. Jonathan's father blamed the Jenny Jones show, arguing it caused the events leading to his son's actions. Jonathan's grandfather even said Jenny Jones triggered the crime. The police investigation moved quickly. Jonathan had already confessed, and investigators had strong physical evidence from the crime scene, along with corroborating witness statements from neighbors and acquaintances. Yet, a detail later emerged from a close friend of Scott's great in Enmore. He claimed that after the taping, there had been a night out during which Scott and Jonathan might have had an intimate encounter. Jonathan, however, always denied this, maintaining that he had been left humiliated and deeply unsettled by the public revelation on the show. He insisted that the producers had led him to believe his admirer was a woman, which only intensified his feelings of betrayal when the truth was revealed on camera. As media coverage grew, the case evolved into more than just a murder trial. It became a flashpoint for discussions about homophobia, public humiliation, and the ethics of sensationalist television. The legal proceedings began on the 14th of October, 1996. Prosecutors initially charged Jonathan with first-degree premeditated murder and felony firearm offenses. The defense countered with a mental health argument, stating that Jonathan suffered from manic depression, now known as bipolar disorder, as well as Graves' disease, a thyroid condition known to cause symptoms such as anxiety, irritability, tremors, heart palpitations, and excessive sweating. They also invoked what was then called the gay panic defense, claiming that Jonathan's violent reaction stemmed from an overwhelming sense of public humiliation and emotional shock that he was unable to control. This strategy drew fierce criticism from LGBTQ rights advocates who viewed it as an unacceptable attempt to justify violence based on gender orientation. During the trial, jurors were repeatedly shown footage from the Jenny Jones episode. After weeks of testimony and arguments, they returned a verdict on the 13th of November, 1996. Jonathan Schmitz was found guilty of second-degree murder. He sentenced to a term of no less than 25 and no more than 50 years in state prison. The case might have ended there, but in March 1995, the Amager family filed a civil lawsuit against the Jenny Jones show, Warner Brothers, and other associated parties. The lawsuit became a high-profile legal battle, raising unprecedented questions about television's responsibility for the psychological well-being of its participants. The family argued that the show had deliberately engineered a dangerous, emotionally volatile situation for the sake of ratings. The suit alleged wrongful death, claiming producers had knowingly exposed Jonathan to a potentially humiliating and psychologically damaging scenario without his informed consent. Their legal team presented evidence that producers had misled Jonathan into thinking the revelation would involve a heterosexual romantic interest while ignoring warning signs of emotional instability in both him and Scott. Testimony during the trial also shed light on the program's behind-the-scenes tactics. Accounts that portrayed a production culture willing to push emotional boundaries for entertainment value, regardless of potential harm. In May 1990, after just 3 hours of deliberation, the jury unanimously sided with the Amador family. They found both the show and the network liable, awarding $29.2 million in damages. The verdict was widely covered in the press and ignited a nationwide debate about the ethical limits of entertainment television and its role in causing psychological or physical harm. However, the outcome would not stand. The show's and network's attorneys appealed, arguing that the producers could not have foreseen such an extreme criminal act and that responsibility rested solely with Jonathan. In September 2002, the Michigan Court of Appeals overturned the jury's decision, clearing the show and Warner Brothers of any legal obligation to pay damages. The appellate ruling that overturned the civil judgment rested on the argument that freedom of expression and press protections allowed for certain types of content, even if that content was socially controversial or potentially harmful. As a result, the Amador family never received the nearly $30 million in damages originally awarded by the first jury verdict. Still, the case left an impact on the Jenny Jones show. In the wake of the controversy, the production implemented a counseling protocol for guests both before and after episodes were taped. However, the damage to its reputation was irreversible. Ratings steadily declined, and within a year, the once popular talk show was canceled and removed from the air entirely. As for the episode involving Scott and Jonathan, it was never officially broadcast. Though portions of the footage appeared in news reports and court coverage, Jonathan faced further legal challenges after his initial conviction. His lawyers appealed, citing errors in the trial process. They argued that the intense media attention, manipulation by producers, and Jonathan's mental health problems weren't properly taken into account. This appeal resulted in a new trial. On September 14, 1999, Jonathan Schmitz was again found guilty of second-degree murder, and his original sentence of 25 to 50 years in prison was reimposed. He served almost 22 years before being paroled on August 22, 2017, at age 47. Due to good behavior, after his release, Jonathan lived a private life, avoiding publicity and declining to discuss the infamous case. In May 2020, the story was re-examined in the premiere episode of the Netflix docuseries Trial by Media. The program criticized what it saw as a profound lack of ethical responsibility in certain daytime talk shows of the 1,992nd shows that knowingly exposed private lives to public scrutiny for the sake of higher ratings. To this day, the Scott Amador case stands as a cautionary tale, resonating in ongoing conversations about media accountability, the limits of free speech, and the profound human cost of transforming personal tragedies into public spectacles. Love is a wonderful feeling that inspires books, music, and films. However, if it's a perverted love, held by a sick individual, it can be devastating, shattering many lives. Similarly, wealth can easily corrupt, causing a person to lose self-control. When feelings are added to this volatile mix, The outcome is rarely positive. Dion Andrea Bao, an immigrant from Jamaica, possessed a striking beauty. She planned to attend college in Atlanta, USA, focusing on finance. She moved to America with her husband, also a Jamaican native, named Sean Nelson, a Jamaica Airlines pilot. They met in Miami nightclub in 1988. Dion was always drawn to wealth. In the 1982nd and 92nd, being a pilot was a prestigious position. They earned a good income and could afford a comfortable lifestyle. However, Sean's job had its downsides. He spent little time at home. 2 years into the relationship, they decided to move to Georgia. Sean was content with his job and life. Dion worked as a secretary at a large company while continuing her education and becoming other. Despite Sean's prestigious and well-paid job, disagreements began to surface. Dion felt he lacked ambition and had no prospects for advancement, which frustrated her. Dion believed he should continue to develop professionally. She pushed him to change careers and go into business, suggesting that her financial education could help them create a family company. She also hoped this would keep him home more. He resisted, so Dion decided to take matters into her own hands. Then, Sean's frequent absences now worked to her advantage. Instead of devoting her free time to her baby, Dion began searching for a man who could offer her a better lifestyle. In April 1996, Dion, working as a secretary, had access to the office mail. One day, she saw an invitation to an exclusive party for wealthy individuals. She recognized this as a chance to meet wealthy and influential people, hoping it would help her achieve her desire for wealth and luxury. Dion asked her boss about the invitation. He explained it was a birthday party for Lance Herndon, a tech mogul. Naturally, Dion was very interested in attending. Initially, her boss was hesitant because she didn't know anyone there. However, impressed by her ambition and confidence, he thought her presence would be well received. Dion's manager learned that another employee had also received an invitation, but didn't plan to go. He convinced that employee to pass the invitation to Dion. She had gotten her way and could now attend a privileged party for the upper crust of society. By this point, she had little interest in her husband and child, wanting only to gain access to U.S. high society and become rich and famous. Lance Herndon's 41st birthday was a golden opportunity for the young woman. He was a well-known Atlanta multimillionaire who made his fortune in the technology business. He owned a company called Access, Inc., focused on integrating high technology into the city's 911 emergency service program. He aimed to expand it. With a deep understanding of computers and advanced solutions, during his career, Lance was recognized as one of the 500 best entrepreneurs in the United States. He even met with President Bill Clinton, who praised his work. Lance was a hard worker, a trait instilled in him by his paternal grandfather who taught him to wake up early and work efficiently. He had 3 alarm clocks in his bedroom, set for 3:40 a.m., 3:50 a.m., and 4 o'clock a.m. Upon waking, he immediately began his workday, delegating tasks to his employees. His house was in the same building as his company's offices. He lived on the first floor, which had a separate entrance, while the rest of the employees worked on the upper floors. Waking up at 4 o'clock a.m., Lance would go to his office upstairs and write messages for the employees who would arrive later. He provided them with instructions, laying them out at their workstations so they knew what to do upon arrival. People willingly worked at his company for many years and were well compensated. Everyone saw in Lance a reasonable and sensitive leader, focused on success. Thanks to his meticulousness and love for his business, he achieved everything one could only dream of. The company flourished in the 90s, and Atlanta became a hub of social life, with Lance becoming a prominent figure, working from Monday to Friday. He didn't forget about rest. On weekends, he often threw private parties. In addition to success and fame, he had weaknesses. His main vice was beautiful women. However, he wasn't conventionally attractive. A short man with a simple appearance, he didn't attract many women in his youth. But when he became wealthy, many women pursued him. By this point, he had been married 3 times. Shortly before the party Dion wanted to attend, he got divorced again. To those close to him, the reason for this breakup was no secret. His infidelity. Women loved him. He was famous, rich, and generous with gifts. He spent thousands of dollars on his mistresses every week, even more than he gave to his wife. She grew tired of enduring his infidelity. So, when the position of Lance Herndon's wife became vacant once again in 1996, the competition was fierce. However, being the next Mrs. Herndon wasn't so pleasant. In fact, 2 of Lance's wives couldn't even stay in the relationship until their first anniversary. Lance quickly lost interest in his lovers, after which he usually offered them money and ended the relationship. Back to 1990. Janine Price became Lance's next wife. Many in the man's circle believed she was the most worthy partner for him. Immediately after their marriage, they began working on their dream home, a 6,000 square meter mansion. Most of their neighbors were wealthy individuals, and construction was underway in a prestigious area in the Roswell suburb of Atlanta. During the same period, the first disagreements appeared. Janine didn't like her husband's approach to business. Even the fact that he left notes for his employees early in the morning, and then went off to do his own thing and practically didn't contact anyone. She considered it selfish. Lance himself was sure that direct communication with ordinary workers was a waste of time. Law of repetition. Lance lost interest in Janine pretty quickly. By this time, Janine was already pregnant with their future son. She noticed that Lance's interest faded. He practically stopped communicating with her, and soon she found out that he was dating and even sleeping with others. For some time, she endured all this, hoping to save the family, expecting that her husband would show interest in her again. But by the time their child was born, she could no longer stand his behavior. Janine decided to break up because of numerous betrayals. So, by his 41st birthday, Lance Herndon was again on the market. Having received an invitation to a party, Dion began to prepare carefully. In April 1996, she found herself at a private party organized by multimillionaire Lance Herndon. She chose the best outfit, did stunning makeup, and styled her hair. There were more than 400 people gathered there, all of them representatives of the privileged community of Atlanta. Despite the fact that Dion didn't know anyone there, she looked so amazing. However, she wasn't interested in these people. She wanted the main attraction, Lance. At this time, Lance didn't communicate much with the guests who came. He usually took a place in the corner of the rented room with a large table and a sofa, sat, and talked with women. He had a habit of keeping a piece of paper on which each woman could write her name and phone number. This piece of paper was never empty. At some point during the evening, Lance found himself drawn to a petite woman with captivating brown eyes, who seemed to be watching him. It was Dion. Despite not being invited, and knowing no one else at the party, she somehow managed to capture the attention of the host himself. In the midst of the celebration, Lance approached her, introduced himself as Lance Herndon, and struck up a conversation. They spent the rest of the evening together, chatting amiably. He obtained Dion's phone number, and from the very next day, their relationship began to blossom. Lance frequently told his inner circle that he had finally met the most stunning woman in Atlanta. This wasn't entirely new behavior. He typically showered his new lovers with both compliments and extravagant gifts. Within a couple of weeks, a brand new luxury Mercedes appeared in Dion's driveway. She had completely charmed him. He seemed to have lost his head. She willingly accepted any amount of money he offered, to the point where he even gave her his credit card. During this period, Dion was still married. However, her husband and son quickly became secondary in her life. Shaun, returning from yet another flight, was understandably surprised to see his wife driving such an expensive car. When he inquired about it, Dion explained that she had a new business coach who was mentoring her. Dion laughed at his old used car and occasionally allowed he to drive her new car. Although Dion was not yet ready to leave her husband, She certainly couldn't give up her newfound luxurious lifestyle, especially since her husband, being a pilot, I was away for weeks at a time, leaving her with ample opportunity to spend time with Lance. Her husband found her excuse somewhat convincing. The car did not arouse much suspicion, but returning from another flight, he found out that his wife had moved to a new big house. In response to his questions, she said that she had been saving money for a long time. Of course, it was a lie. Sean suspected deception and demanded proof of her alleged savings. But Dion simply avoided the question. Now, he really doubted this, so he decided to take his child back to his family in Jamaica. Little did he know that this was exactly what Dion wanted. She could now freely devote all of her time to Lance, hoping to become the next Mrs. Herndon. It remains unclear whether she ever told Lance about her husband and child. Regardless, he willingly entered into a serious relationship with her. Soon, he had a pretty secretary with a Jamaican accent who would rush to his office at a moment's notice in a gifted car. However, Dion wasn't the only one engaged in deception. Lance, too, was a deceiver. His accountant was his own mother, a fact that was far from coincidental. He needed someone he could trust implicitly to keep the true state of his company a secret. The harsh reality was that his accounts were nearly empty. He was broke due to his exorbitant spending on parties and women. His credit cards were tens of thousands of dollars in debt, but he couldn't bring himself to stop and adopt a more modest lifestyle. Lance's mother was fully aware of the situation but kept it a secret. Her primary concern was to ensure that taxes were paid and that the staff received their salaries on time, so that no one would suspect a thing. Approximately 2 months into his relationship with Dion, Lance's total debts reached almost $500,000. The lovers' relationship had developed rapidly, but then things began to follow his usual pattern. Sometime after they met, Lance began to lose interest. During this period, he spent between $20,000 and $40,000 each month on his mistress. She quickly became addicted to the wealthy life, filling her wardrobe exclusively with designer clothes and even refusing to wear the same outfits twice. Lance did not want to tell her the truth. According to his standard scenario, he gradually began to limit communication, assuming that everything would soon come to naught. Dion, however, proved to be far more persistent than the American women Lance was accustomed to dealing with. Despite his persistent ignoring of her calls, Dion began seeking out opportunities to meet him. Now, instead of money, he offered her only excuses. This was easy for him, as he had a cheat sheet with a list of the most beautiful women in Atlanta. For Dion, all this was a big blow. Now Dion's replacement is Kathy Collins, whom Lance met in Los Angeles in 1989. They kept in touch regularly over the years, but Kathy doesn't seem particularly attractive, at least not enough to be his fourth wife. Nevertheless, her photo took up space on his nightstand. During this same period, he was also communicating with Talana Caraway, an employee of his company, whom he paid personally for small administrative tasks. Not realizing the true scale of what was happening, Dion continued her desperate attempts to establish contact. But she was already considered written off like all the other young women. She kept calling and became increasingly aggressive. It became obvious that she wouldn't take no for an answer. Now, Lance described her to his friends as a real hysteric who behaved inappropriately, but Dion could no longer back down. She had received so much money from him that she was overcome with greed and couldn't stop. On July 10, 1996, she put on her best outfit and perfect makeup, ensure that Lance wouldn't be able to refuse her and that she would receive a lot of money again. Late in the evening, she went to his house, but before she reached the door, she noticed another woman inside. The plan suddenly failed. Furious, she ran to the door and began banging on it, screaming hysterically. Instead of going out to her, Lance claimed he didn't know who she was and called the police. When the patrol cars arrived, Dion was still hysterical. She was even more enraged that Lance was acting as if he didn't know her at all. She claimed that she had been dating him for months and that he paid all her bills. But because of her behavior, No one listened to her. Lance was also furious. He blocked the credit card he had given to Dion, and a statement was made about an attempted break-in, meaning Dion could end up behind bars. Naturally, this made her even angrier. In August, the situation began to escalate. A trial was coming, which could send Dion to prison, something she couldn't allow. Lance completely cut off her financial support. Finally, Dion was on the verge of divorce from her husband. Lance continued his exorbitant spending and met a new girl, spending time with her. On August 8, 1996, he attended a celebration dedicated to the Olympic Games, then picked up his 92-year-old grandmother from the airport. His ex-wife Janine decided to help with his grandmother. Then, he met Talana Caraway. They had already had several dates, and Lance wanted to get to know her better. Talana left the office at 10:37 p.m., and when she came home at 11 o'clock p.m., she received a message from Lance. Talana called him. They laughed together, chatted for a few minutes, and both went to bed. The next morning, the 9th of August, at around 8 o'clock a.m., the company employees arrived for work. However, this day was unlike any other. The usual instructions Lance, their manager, left were missing. This was very strange and uncharacteristic of him, leaving everyone confused and unsure of what to do. The residential area of the building was off-limits to regular employees, so they had to wait for Lance's mother to arrive. She went down to the residential section and screamed. She ran back out and frantically called emergency services, explaining that she had found her son in bed, covered in blood. The operator tried to obtain more details, but the woman was too distraught to speak clearly. The bloody scene had shocked her deeply. When paramedics and law enforcement officers arrived, they confirmed that 41-year-old Lance Herndon was dead. He was lying on his back, with his arms crossed over his chest. An examination revealed he had suffered at least a dozen blows to the face with a blunt object. There were no signs of forced entry. All 3 alarm clocks Lance used were turned off. His wallet and several credit cards were left on the dresser in the bedroom. But the shirt and pants he had worn the night before were missing. In the master bathroom, a bloody pillowcase, likely used to wipe the murder weapon, was found in the toilet. His laptop and an expensive ring were missing near the garage. A chewing gum wrapper was also found. Lance's mother noticed a crucial detail: a photo of Kathy, his longtime girlfriend, which he usually kept on his nightstand, was turned face down. The medical examiner determined the murder took place between 2 o'clock a.m. and 4 o'clock a.m., and that an adjustable wrench, recently used by Lance, had been used as the murder weapon and was now missing. The tool had been lying in a visible place, easily accessible. Considering Lance's promiscuous lifestyle, the murder appeared to be a crime of passion. The police immediately began questioning relatives, searching for anyone who had recently behaved aggressively towards Lance or seemed to be stalking him. One of the prime suspects was Janine, his ex-wife. She had a $1 million life insurance policy on Lance and was the sole beneficiary. However, she appeared to have no strong financial motive. Despite the substantial payout, Lance had continued to financially support her and their son, paying thousands of dollars monthly until their son turned 18. This amount would exceed the lump sum of $1 million, so he was more valuable alive. Furthermore, Janine willingly cooperated with law enforcement and did not arouse suspicion. Kathy was with another man that night. Her alibi was confirmed, as was Talana's. Investigators continued to pursue other leads. There were plenty of them. A public funeral was held. Lance was buried in a closed casket because his face was too disfigured to be restored. Then, the most shocking information came to light. There was no money in the company's account. It turned out that Lance and his mother had been struggling for years to stay afloat. They immediately spent any income to pay off debts and employee salaries, concealing their financial struggles. After Lance's death, his relatives faced an almost unbearable debt burden of around $1 million. To pay off at least some of the debt, including unpaid salaries and taxes, they began selling off property. mostly below market value. This allowed them to significantly reduce the debt. Meanwhile, detectives continued their search for the killer. 18 months passed without any leads, and the investigation stalled. The situation changed when Sean Nelson arrived at the police station. He was in the process of divorcing Dion, and after a recent argument with his wife, he contacted the police. During that argument, Dion allegedly threatened him, saying in a fit of anger that she would kill him just as she had done with Lance Herndon. Sean further claimed that Dion admitted to being in Lance Herndon's house on the night of the murder. At the time, divorce proceedings were already underway. When the name of Lance surfaced in court, Dion lied, stating they were just friends. However, investigators found her current testimony contradicted her initial testimony immediately following Lance's death. Furthermore, Dion will have a trial for attempting to break into Lance's house. Investigators began to wonder if Dion had killed Lance to prevent him from testifying against her. The police wanted to talk to Dion and went to her house. When no one answered the door, they asked her neighbors if they knew where she was. But they didn't. The investigators left the scene and returned to the station. Shortly after the police departed, Dion returned to the neighbor's house and inquired about the police visit. Dion claimed she was taking a shower when the police arrived. But the neighbor was skeptical. Observing that Dion's hair was dry and she was wearing makeup, Dion then got into her car and drove away. The neighbor contacted the police and reported Dion's departure. Police officers then returned to Dion's house to wait for her return. About 20 minutes later, Dion arrived home. She then became hysterical upon learning of Lance's death. However, the police found her reaction unconvincing. She was invited to the station for questioning, where she mentioned that Lance's laptop was with her. She explained that Lance himself had brought it to her home shortly before the murder. This claim contradicted the established timeline of events. Moreover, Lance's employees stated that he would never have taken his laptop out of the office, as he constantly needed it for work, and certainly not without its case, which was later found in Dion's storage room. On January 29, 1998, police arrested Dion Baugh and charged her with the murder of Lance Herndon. Released on $150,000 bail, prosecutors spent time building their case against her. Among the evidence presented when the case finally went to trial in 2001 was the fact that on the day Lance Herndon was found dead, Dion had purchased $3,000 worth of furniture with one of Lance's credit cards. She also had his expensive laptop, which his associates said he never left with him. Among the state's witnesses was Detective William E. Anastasio, who recalled what others had said about Dion, painting a picture of her as a promiscuous gold digger, a claim her defense team vehemently disputed. After 6 hours and 20 minutes of deliberation, a jury convicted Dion Baugh of first-degree murder for the murder of Lance Herndon and sentenced her to life in prison. However, 2 years later, the Georgia Supreme Court overturned the conviction, finding that Detective Anastasio's testimony had prejudiced the jury. Dion Baugh's second trial for the murder of Lance Herndon ended in a mistrial after the jury failed to reach a consensus. She was released on $500,000 bail, rather than risk a third trial, which could have resulted in a reinstatement of her life sentence. Dion pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter in November 2004. She agreed to serve 10 years in prison, followed by 10 years of probation upon her release. Dion Baugh was released from prison in November 2011 at the age of 44. Her ex-husband and children still live in Jamaica. People described as psychopaths commonly have antisocial personality disorder, which means they typically cannot feel remorse, guilt, empathy, or compassion. They are skilled at mimicking emotions to appear normal. They are patient and wait for the ideal moment to take advantage of others, often hurting others for personal gain. Countering their schemes is difficult, because they use manipulation, deception to lure victims, control them, and ultimately harm them. The following story is an example of this horrific abuse. A young girl believes in love, believes in sweet promises, and ends up paying the price with her own life and her child, who is only a few days away from being born. In 2006, the case of Jennifer Zacconi horrified Italy, becoming one of the country's most shocking criminal cases. Jennifer was born on February 19, 1984, in Martellago, a small town in the province of Venezia. She was the only child of a modest family. Her mother was a homemaker, and her father worked in a factory. Her parents loved her very much and raised her in a loving and trusting home. Jennifer was a cheerful, outgoing, and sociable girl who easily made friends and was always the life of the party. Jennifer grew up in a small town with limited options for young people. Most local youth spent their time at the few bars or the single nightclub. Jennifer and her friends often went to a popular bar in the town center. In 2003, she met Lucio Niero, the bar owner and bartender. Lucio, almost 13 years older than Jennifer, was immediately drawn to her and began paying her attention. Their brief encounters soon became more serious. Jennifer felt flattered by the older man's interest. Lucio complimented her, bought her drinks, drove her home, and gave her expensive presents. Jennifer told her friends that she initially didn't like Lucio, but his charm eventually won her over. Several months later, Lucio and Jennifer started dating. Their relationship moved quickly, but it was complicated. Lucio confessed early on that he was married with 2 young children. However, he misrepresented his marriage, claiming he was unhappy. He told Jennifer he didn't love his wife anymore but couldn't leave because of his children. Lucio often told Jennifer how terrible his home life was, saying he only felt happy with her and that his home life was a nightmare. Jennifer believed him and felt sorry for him. She listened carefully to his stories, even started to dislike his wife, who Lucio described as cruel, selfish, greedy, and dishonest. He stated that his wife was only after his money. He also expressed concern for his children, saying they would be devastated by a divorce. Lucio promised Jennifer he would talk to his wife, resolve their issues, and get a divorce, so he and Jennifer could be together. He sounded so sincere that Jennifer introduced him to her parents. Jennifer told her mother about Lucio's troubled marriage. Initially, her mother was worried, but Jennifer convinced her that Lucio was genuine and would follow through on his promises. Seeing Jennifer's happiness with Lucio, her mother reluctantly accepted the relationship, hoping he would eventually marry her daughter. Lucio became a regular and well-liked guest at the Zacconi's house, almost like family. Lucio and Jennifer were together for roughly a year and a half. Throughout their relationship, Lucio consistently told Jennifer he was about to divorce his wife so they could be together. However, despite his complaints about his marriage, he never planned to leave his family. Lucio liked having a double life. Keeping Jennifer around boosted his self-esteem, made his life more thrilling, and made him feel important. In July 2005, Jennifer was surprised to find out she was pregnant. She wasn't afraid. Instead, she felt it was meant to be. She hoped the pregnancy would push Lucio to finally leave his wife, get a divorce, and marry her, like they had discussed. A few days later, Jennifer told Lucio during one of their regular hotel meetings that she was pregnant. Lucio was definitely the father. He couldn't accuse her of cheating. He reacted instantly, his face changing, and he fell silent before demanding she get an abortion right away. Things didn't go as expected. Jennifer was shocked by what she was hearing. She initially thought Lucio was kidding, but when she asked him to explain, he exploded in anger. He grabbed her shoulders, shook her hard, and yelled at her to solve the issue at once. Jennifer was scared. She had never seen Lucio behave like this. He seemed on the verge of hitting her, and he actually was fighting the urge to do so. He paced back and forth, repeatedly demanding to know who else knew about the pregnancy. They couldn't talk calmly that day. They argued intensely and then left. going their separate ways. Jennifer wasn't too bothered by Lucio's reaction. She thought, perhaps too optimistically, that he just needed time to understand and accept things before making the correct choice. So, she decided not to push him and didn't call him for several days after their argument. But finally, she couldn't resist and called him first. Lucio believed Jennifer had ended the pregnancy and expected their relationship to return to normal. He immediately asked if she had taken care of it. When Jennifer said she hadn't, he became furious. He yelled at her over the phone, accusing her of ruining his life. They were unable to have a peaceful discussion. Jennifer realized he hadn't changed his mind and decided to have the baby, regardless of whether he supported her or not. As time went on, Lucio and Jennifer saw each other less often. They rarely spoke, and when they did, it usually led to angry fights. Lucio's wife still didn't know about the affair or that Jennifer was pregnant. Lucio acted like a loving husband and father, hiding his affair while also pushing Jennifer to get an abortion. Jennifer's parents supported her decision to keep the baby, reassuring her that they would help raise the child, even if the father never came around. Deep down, however, they hoped Lucio would eventually take responsibility, acknowledge the child, and marry Jennifer as he had promised. For several months, Lucio avoided any contact with his pregnant lover. During this time, Jennifer had come to terms with the idea of becoming a single mother. She tried to stay positive and actively prepared for the baby's arrival. She already knew she was expecting a boy and had even chosen a name for him, Heaven. By the spring of 2006, Jennifer Zacconi had everything ready for her baby. Her parents helped her create a nursery with a crib, stroller, blankets, and baby clothes. She had sent Lucio, the baby's father, ultrasound photos and messages, but he never replied. Even though he didn't respond, Jennifer tried to be patient. She hoped he would eventually come to terms with the situation and choose to be with her and their son every day. She checked her phone and email, hoping to hear from him. At the end of April 2006, Jennifer received a surprising phone call from Lucio. He inquired about her well-being and said they needed to meet to discuss something important. His demeanor was calm, and his voice was gentle, a change from how he'd been for months. For the first time since she told him about the pregnancy, Lucio seemed genuinely kind and sincere. He gave her the impression that he truly wanted to have a serious conversation. This filled Jennifer with hope. She believed Lucio had finally chosen her and their child, decided to leave his marriage, and was going to propose to her at their meeting. Jennifer told her mother what she thought. Her mother shared her positive outlook. Jennifer's mother believed Lucio was grown up and reliable. She thought he would make a good husband and father. Even though things had been difficult, she would have been happy to accept him into their family. Lucio and Jennifer planned to meet on the evening of the 29th of April, 2006 for a walk in the park. Jennifer found it strange that Lucio hadn't suggested a cafe or hotel like he usually did, but she was so excited to see him that she dismissed it. Her baby was due in less than a week, and she still hoped Lucio would be the child's father. The evening before their meeting, Lucio called Jennifer again to confirm the details. He told her he would wait for her in the parking lot of a small shop about half a kilometer from her home. The area became nearly deserted in the evenings, but this didn't raise any alarms for Jennifer. She felt no sense of danger. Jennifer meticulously prepared for the meeting, wanting to make a good impression on Lucio. She dressed up, styled her hair, and carefully applied her makeup. She spent almost an hour choosing the perfect dress, taking a small purse with her phone, mints, and €5. She went to the parking lot and waited for Lucio. He arrived around 8:00 p.m. in a car Jennifer didn't recognize, assuming he'd bought a new car since they last saw each other. She didn't question it. Lucio suggested getting ice cream at a nearby gas station, and Jennifer, trusting him, got into the car without hesitation. 2 hours later, Jennifer's mother began to worry and decided to call her daughter. To her dismay, Jennifer's phone was turned off. Her anxiety grew. By midnight, she didn't know what to do. Suddenly, the phone rang, But it wasn't Jennifer. It was Lucio. Lucio calmly asked if Jennifer had made it home yet. He said they met, talked, walked in the park, and he dropped her off in the parking lot of a store near her house. When Jennifer's mother told him that she hadn't returned home, Lucio feigned concern and panic. He said he would call back later, but couldn't search for her right away because he had urgent matters to attend to. After this, he hung up and never called back. Jennifer's parents were terrified when she didn't come home. They called all her friends, thinking she might have gotten caught up with someone and lost track of time. But none of her friends had seen her that night or knew where she was. Around 1 a.m., they received a text message from Jennifer's phone. It said she was with friends at a casino in Slovenia, a place she had been before. The message told them not to worry and that she would be home in a day. Jennifer's mother immediately tried to call her, but the phone was off. She then realized someone else must have sent the text. Even though the casino was only a 2-hour drive from their town near the Italian border, Jennifer couldn't have gone there. She had no money. And, more importantly, she did not have her passport with her, which she needed to enter Slovenia. Jennifer's parents worried she had been kidnapped and that Lucio was involved. They couldn't understand why he would do this or where Jennifer could be. They immediately reported her missing to the police because Jennifer was heavily pregnant and about to give birth. The police began investigating right away. They first checked for any accidents or emergencies reported in the area. Jennifer's mother told the police about Lucio's suspicious behavior and that he was the father of the child and the last person to see her. Lucio became the main suspect. Lucio was brought in for questioning and reiterated his previous statement. He had talked to Jennifer and then dropped her off at the store parking lot. Because the parking lot lacked security cameras, his statement could not be confirmed. Lacking any physical evidence connecting him to Jennifer's disappearance, the authorities had to let him go. But they secretly began monitoring him. On the 30th of April, Jennifer's parents appeared on television, pleading for anyone with information about her disappearance to contact them. Despite this, the police received no helpful new leads. They then re-interviewed Lucio, who again denied any involvement. He admitted to being in a relationship with Jennifer and said he was worried about her. However, the police found his calmness and lack of emotion disturbing. Lucio even suggested that Jennifer might have been kidnapped by Roma people who, he alleged, could have taken her to sell her baby. Because the police lacked concrete proof, they couldn't arrest him. A week later, Lucio vanished. By this time, Lucio's wife discovered his affair with a young, pregnant woman and that he was a suspect in her disappearance. She was shocked because she thought Lucio was a dedicated family man. Feeling betrayed, she filed for divorce and requested full custody of their children. While their marriage crumbled, Lucio fled, apparently intending to hide and avoid further investigation. On May 7th, Lucio called his wife unexpectedly. Unbeknownst to Lucio, the authorities were monitoring his phone and tracked his location to Milan. He was arrested that day and taken to the Marshal Lago police station. Lucio denied any involvement in Jennifer's disappearance, insisting he loved her and was willing to leave his family for her. However, his story changed. He then claimed Jennifer never arrived for their planned meeting that night, but a recording of his phone conversation with Jennifer's mother contradicted this new version of events. Investigators examined Jennifer's cell phone data and found its last signal came from near a gas station about a mile from her house. The gas station had an outdoor security camera, so detectives reviewed the video footage. Although the video quality was poor, the parking lot was almost empty around 9:30 p.m. On the 29th of April, a car pulled into the lot, and despite the unclear details, investigators believed they knew who was inside. At first, nothing happened. Then, a woman abruptly ran from the car, appearing terrified. The driver got out and chased her. The woman, likely hampered by her pregnancy, stumbled several times. The man quickly caught her, hit her repeatedly, and then dragged her by her hair out of the camera's view. Detectives immediately combed the area around the gas station. In the bushes nearby, they found a torn piece of fabric with reddish-brown stains. The fragment was sent to a lab for analysis, and it was soon confirmed that the stains were blood and matched Jennifer's DNA. One critical challenge remained. The car in the video did not belong to Lucio. Without being able to directly tie him to the events shown in the footage, building a case against him was difficult. However, investigators managed to decipher the car's license plate number and issued a search alert for the vehicle. The car was traced to a rental company, and records showed that on the 29th of April, it had been rented by none other than Lucio Niero. Faced with the overwhelming evidence and the contradictions in his account, Lucio understood he couldn't keep denying the accusations. He decided to help with the investigation, hoping for a reduced punishment. The investigators' main concern was finding Jennifer's body. Since they were certain she was dead, Lucio admitted that he had only been using Jennifer for amusement and never planned to leave his wife for her. He confessed to deceiving Jennifer with false promises. Her pregnancy was unexpected, and he initially hoped to persuade her to have an abortion. However, Jennifer refused, which threatened his marriage and financial security. For 9 months, Lucio waited and hoped Jennifer would change her mind, but she never did. He knew that if she gave birth, the truth would eventually come out, potentially leading to a divorce that would cost him half his business and require him to pay significant child support. To protect his marriage and reputation, Lucio went to great lengths to keep his wife in the dark. Lucio arranged a meeting with Jennifer, and she happily agreed. According to him, he still hoped to convince her to end the pregnancy, seemingly ignoring the fact that she was just days away from giving birth. Their conversation quickly escalated into an argument, and they began shouting at each other. He drove to the gas station, believing it was a secluded spot with no cameras or witnesses where they could continue the discussion. During the argument, Jennifer allegedly threatened to tell his wife everything, which Lucio claimed drove him into a rage. He said he struck her several times in the face to silence her. Jennifer then threatened to report him to the police. She got out of the car and tried to run, but her advanced pregnancy made it difficult for her to move quickly, and she stumbled and fell multiple times. Lucio caught up to her and, in a fit of anger, began hitting her. Then, he dragged her by her hair into a wooded area near the road. Lucio claimed he had no intention of killing Jennifer, but was overcome with rage and lost control. He grabbed a piece of rope lying on the ground and used it to strangle her. However, the rope was old and rotted, breaking in his hands. By the time he realized what had happened, Jennifer was already unresponsive. Panicking, he decided to get rid of her body. He dragged her farther away from the road until he came across a deep trench. Recent rains had turned the ground at the bottom into soft, wet mud. Lucio decided it was the perfect place to hide her body. He threw Jennifer face down into the trench, then climbed in after her and began stomping on her to push her deeper into the muddy ground. He walked back and forth over her body, even jumping on it to press it further into the muck. Afterward, he shoveled some dirt over her, leaving the scene in a rush. Lucio led authorities to the site where he had hidden Jennifer's body. Just a week earlier, construction workers had filled in the trench, making it highly unlikely that anyone would have found Jennifer's remains without Lucio's confession. Excavating the site and recovering the remains required significant effort. Finally, after much effort, they found her. When the remains were sent for forensic examination, the results were shocking. Despite the decomposition, medical examiners identified numerous injuries sustained while Jennifer was alive, including bruises, abrasions, and scratches. Ligature marks on her neck indicated strangulation with a rope, but that was not what caused her death. Jennifer had lost consciousness during the assault, and Lucio had thrown her into the trench while she was still alive. Jennifer tried to breathe, which was evidenced by soil and mud found deep in her airways, ultimately causing her death. Furthermore, as Lucio stomped on her body to push it deeper into the mud, he fractured her spine, collarbone, arm, and several ribs. Experts concluded that both Jennifer and her unborn child would have survived if Lucio had not pushed her into the mud. Despite her injuries, her life, and that of her child, might have been saved. After confessing, Lucio claimed he had acted in a fit of rage, insisting he was temporarily out of his mind. he requested a psychological evaluation, which determined that he was fully aware of his actions at the time of the crime. However, experts did note signs of psychopathic tendencies. Prosecutors argued that Lucio's actions were premeditated, believing he was motivated by the financial fallout he would face if his affair and Jennifer's pregnancy became public knowledge, leading to a scandalous divorce. There was no doubt that he committed the crime deliberately, and his primary motive was to protect his wealth. The case became well known, but news outlets didn't mention Jennifer was pregnant. This angered the Zacconi family. Because of this, they decided to give an interview where they discussed Jennifer's pregnancy and shared photos taken after her death of her and her unborn son in a small coffin. Lucio's trial started in 2008, 2 years after the crime occurred. During the trial, the defense argued that Lucio hadn't planned the crime and was emotionally distressed when he committed it. Surprisingly, even though a psychiatric evaluation showed Lucio was mentally competent, the judge decided the crime wasn't intentional. In October 2008, Lucio Niero received a 30-year prison sentence, but he could be eligible for parole after only 15 years. Jennifer's family was very upset by this relatively light sentence. They tried to appeal the decision to get a longer prison term for Lucio, but they failed. The court also ordered Lucio must pay provisional compensation of €80,000 to Jessica's mother, Anna Maria Giannone, and €85,000 to her other relatives. However, Lucio declared bankruptcy and never paid them any money. In 2016, Lucio's good behavior earned him privileges, including daytime work release in the city and multi-week home visits. He was paroled in 2017 after serving 11 years for the violent double crime. Lucio never showed remorse or apologized to Jennifer's parents for the loss of their daughter and unborn grandchild. At the end of April 2017, the unusual silence of Melinda Vasilii, a 22-year-old girl who was always cheerful and smiling, made her friends immediately worried. The last person to see her alive was her ex-boyfriend, a stormy love affair with endless arguments, breakups and reunions. Everyone thought this was just another argument, until the next morning. A horrifying scene was discovered in the small apartment. Melinda was lying motionless in the bedroom, on a bed soaked in blood. She was stabbed 47 times, including 27 in the neck and 6 in the chest. A tragic end to a love that was once expected to last a lifetime. What turned a sweet love into a bloody tragedy? Why did a boy who once vowed to love her become an internationally wanted man? And what is the truth behind those 47 fateful stabs? Let's delve into the whole shocking story. Melinda Vasilii was born in Ontario, Canada, on June 28, 1994. She came from a loving, supportive family with her sister, Christina, and brother, David. Known for her infectious laughter and ability to cheer others up with her humor and kindness, Melinda was loved by all who knew her. She aspired to be a hairstylist and was working towards that dream. More than anything, Melinda wanted to get married, create a loving relationship, and become a dedicated mother someday. Agar Hassan was born in Hamilton, Ontario, about an hour away from Kitchener. His parents were Kurdish refugees who had escaped Iraq. They fled to Canada to avoid the Anfal campaign, a period of widespread violence and ethnic cleansing targeting Kurds under Saddam Hussein's rule. While Canada offered them safety, they continued to struggle with the emotional pain of being displaced and traumatized. Agar's childhood was difficult, filled with stress and conflict at home. He frequently saw arguments and aggression between family members. As a teenager, Agar was violently attacked, leaving him with both physical and emotional wounds. By the age of 16, he had quit school and become withdrawn. Spending most of his time alone, his emotional difficulties were worsened by two events. First, in 2014, His friend Corporal Nathan Cirillo was killed in a terrorist attack in Ottawa. Then, 2 years later, another friend, Alan, died by end his life, jumping from a ferry into Lake Ontario. Ager was deeply saddened by these deaths. Although he seemed distant, he strongly desired emotional connection and attention, a need that would later heavily influence his relationship with Melinda. Two life stories, shaped in radically different environments, were about to intersect, launching a chain of events that would end in tragedy. Kitchener is a city in southwestern Ontario, Canada, situated a short distance from both Toronto and the American border. Originally named Berlin, the city was renamed in 1916 during World War I. Today, Kitchener is a thriving city with good infrastructure, well-regarded schools, and a vibrant cultural life. A major annual event is Oktoberfest, the largest celebration of its kind outside of Germany. The festival features parades, beer, traditional music, and local food, drawing large crowds of residents and visitors. One of Kitchener's notable landmarks is the West Montrose Covered Bridge, also known as the Kissing Bridge, which was featured in the 2017 film adaptation of Stephen King's It Averable. Against this calm and orderly backdrop, Melinda Vasily lived in a residential complex on Country Hill Drive. The quiet neighborhood, with its neat lawns and nearby parks, Melinda and Ager met in 2016. Melinda, 23, was independent and focused on her career. Ager lived near Kitchener. In Hamilton, they became friends quickly, bonding over shared interests and enjoying each other's company. Soon, they were talking regularly and officially dating. Melinda clearly stated her desire for a serious relationship, a family, and children. Ager initially agreed with her plans, and they began building a life together, discussing daily routines and responsibilities. It appeared they had a good balance in their relationship, but soon, Melinda and Ager started to disagree. Melinda wanted a stable relationship with clear boundaries and a predictable routine. Ager desired constant closeness and needed frequent reassurance. He became upset when communication slowed down or he felt distance between them. Even minor issues, like weekend plans, jealousy, or how they spent their time apart, caused friction. At first, these problems were quickly resolved, but they began happening more often. Their arguments became more heated. Simple explanations turned into lengthy, repetitive discussion. Melinda wanted clear agreements and the freedom to manage her own life. Conversely, wanted more of Melinda's time and attention. Their text messages began to reflect these differences, with growing complaints about tone. Emotional responses. The emotional roller coaster became more pronounced. Calm periods were regularly interrupted by new arguments, each one more intense than the last. Their approaches to resolving conflict also diverged. Ager increasingly framed their disagreements as the result of cultural differences, asking her to be more understanding of his reactions. Melinda felt that it wasn't about background, but about respecting boundaries, and she wanted clear, written agreements. The more she insisted on defined rules, the more he pushed back, asking for exceptions for the sake of the relationship. This led to repeated discussions about personal freedom, trust, and jealousy. By the end of the year, the initial happy period of their relationship had ended. They began disagreeing on important core beliefs rather than minor details. By early 2017, their relationship was in crisis, and they needed to either establish clear boundaries or break up. Right before our one-year anniversary, Melinda decided to end the relationship permanently and abruptly. However, Ager believed it was just a temporary pause and kept contacting her. But Melinda was firm about wanting a complete separation. In February 2017, she traveled to Hamilton to return his belongings and settle practical matters. The meeting turned into a long conversation, and eventually they got back together on the 14th of February. A conscious choice to try again under clearly defined rules. But within weeks, it became obvious that their past issues hadn't gone away. On April 3, 2017, Melinda broke up with Ager via text message, explaining she was unhappy and the relationship wasn't working. Ager, upset by the breakup and Melinda's previous refusal to meet, drove to her apartment in Kitchener. When he arrived at 38 Country Hill Drive, he broke in through the back door. Melinda, who was with her roommate Anna and others, was frightened. They ran to a neighbor's apartment upstairs. Anna's boyfriend and a neighbor tried to de-escalate the situation and peacefully remove Ager, but the argument turned into a physical fight. After neighbors called emergency services, police arrived and arrested Ager at the apartment. He was charged with unlawfully entering the apartment and with 2 counts of assault for fighting with the men inside. After being questioned, Ager was released with the following conditions. He cannot contact Melinda by phone, message, or social media, and he is not allowed to enter Kitchener. These restrictions were put in place to protect Melinda after their breakup, and Ager was made fully aware of them. Despite the court order, Ager Hassan continued to contact Melinda. In 2 weeks, he sent her over 60 messages. These messages varied in tone, including compliments, pleas, expressions of frustration, and veiled threats. He downplayed their disagreements as minor issues caused by cultural differences. He also claimed their relationship was free of infidelity and violence. He pleaded for another chance, insisted he was still committed, and declared he couldn't abandon what he considered the best part of his life. Ager's messages were mostly ignored. On the 20th of April, Melinda explicitly told him to stop contacting her. She wanted him to leave her alone. Reminding him of the restrictions implemented after the break-in, she explained that her request was due to legitimate fears for her safety. He persisted despite the no-contact order. His messages became more frequent and changed in tone. He started by gently asking to meet, then became irritated and demanded an in-person meeting to explain himself and be understood. He even asked for a final hug. These constant messages clearly broke the no-contact order, but he kept sending them. Melinda knew he acted without thinking sometimes. However, she believed a direct conversation was the only way to truly understand the situation and end the problem. She agreed to meet, but only under specific rules. It had to be at her apartment. With other people there, no one could leave the room, and they couldn't spend a lot of time alone together. To ensure safety, Melinda arranged for 3 people to be in the apartment during the conversation. Her roommate Anna, her sister Christina, and a friend named Ella. Their role was to stay nearby, monitor the situation, and intervene if needed. They also agreed that the doors would remain open. Melinda would keep her phone close, and the conversation would be time-limited. This setup was a compromise, balancing her right to peace with the reality of Ager's relentless attempts to make contact. The plan was in place. The next step was the meeting itself. The date was set for the evening of the 27th of April, 2017. Later that night, another guest joined the women in the apartment, increasing the sense of oversight. Ager was supposed to arrive at an agreed-upon time, but he was late. As the night wore on, and he still hadn't shown up, it became clear the meeting might not happen after all. But around midnight, it did arrive. Melinda and Ager started talking privately in the apartment. Although others were there, they were the only ones involved in the conversation. At first, things were calm, but the atmosphere was definitely tense. To give them space, Anna, Ella, and another friend went to Burger King. Security footage from the Burger King showed the women had spent about 30 minutes there. When they returned to the apartment on Country Hill Drive, they found the front door locked. Their knocks and calls went unanswered. After several attempts, the door finally opened. But what greeted them was an eerie silence. The living room and kitchen were neat and showed no signs of a struggle. However, Melinda's bedroom was very disturbing. She was on the floor, and she had been stabbed many times. 2 kitchen knives were near her. One was close to her hand, and the other was a little further away. A forensic report later showed that she had 47 stab wounds on her face, neck, chest, stomach, and arms, including 27 stab wounds to the neck. She also suffered 6 stab wounds to the chest. Some of these wounds appeared to be from when she tried to defend herself. A call to emergency services was made immediately, but when paramedics arrived, they could only confirm that Melinda had passed. Investigators found no signs of forced entry or struggle elsewhere in the apartment, indicating that the confrontation had occurred exclusively in the bedroom. The time of death was determined to fall within the during which her friends had been away. By the time, Ager was already gone. The vehicle he had driven was also missing from the scene. After leaving Melinda's apartment on the night of the 27th of April into the early hours of the 28th of April, Ager Hassan made his way toward the U.S. border. Security cameras filmed his car driving over the Peace Bridge from Fort Erie, Ontario, to Buffalo, New York. He crossed the border without incident. Customs officers did not stop him. Later, traffic cameras and license plate readers followed his route through the United States. In Pennsylvania, he stopped at a Walmart, took off his Canadian license plates, and put on different ones. Where those new plates came from was later investigated. By the morning of the 28th of April, Canadian authorities had already issued an alert with details of the suspect and his vehicle. However, since Ager was now on American soil, the case was transferred to American law enforcement, turning it into an international manhunt. Investigators at the crime scene had collected significant evidence against him, such as fingerprints, blood, and witness accounts. Their main concern was stopping him from escaping a larger area. Luckily, his use of highways created a digital record. Toll road and highway cameras showed him traveling south. He didn't try to hide or use back roads. Instead, he stayed on main highways, likely indicating he was in a rush. Investigators thought he was trying to get as far from the border as possible before police were notified. At that time, his final destination was unknown. However, his route through Pennsylvania toward the southern U.S. suggested he was heading for the Mexican border. He wouldn't reach it, though, because the situation would soon change. 3 days after the crime, now outside of New York State, Ager accessed the internet and posted a lengthy message on Reddit detailing his version of what had happened on the night of the 27th of April. The post appeared in a popular subreddit and quickly gained attention, largely because it included information that closely matched details from the ongoing investigation. Ager claimed that his final meeting with Melinda started peacefully, but escalated into an argument due to what he described as her aggressive behavior. According to him, she was the first to grab a knife, and he insisted he acted only in self-defense, attributing the multiple wounds to panic and fear. In an attempt to justify himself, he shifted focus to Melinda's personality, accusing her of being emotionally unstable, quick-tempered, and prone to provoking jealousy. He also mentioned her friends, portraying them as having a negative influence on her decisions. The post included details that only someone present at the scene could have known, such as the positioning of the knives and the timeline of when others left the apartment, further confirming his involvement. Law enforcement viewed the Reddit post as both a form of indirect admission and an attempt to influence public perception. In the comments, some users condemned him, while others asked follow-up questions. Ager replied selectively but kept the conversation going, making his behavior during the manhunt even more unusual. This online confession drew significant media attention and rapidly amplified public interest in the case. From that point forward, the search extended beyond law enforcement. The story was now headlining news on both sides of the border. His name and photos began circulating widely. After that, Ager started using Instagram to create a specific image of himself, someone who, even though he was being chased, was still in charge of his situation. On May 20th, he posted a message complaining about how the police were handling his case. He said they were wrongly making him look like he was running away. He mentioned Nashville, suggesting he was trying to get to the Mexican border. In the same post, he told people not to trust the police and said that if he really wanted to disappear, he would have already. He was speaking with confidence and drama, calling himself intelligent and basically saying he could vanish completely if he wanted to. This show of boldness seemed intended to change the story from the actual evidence to his own thoughts and reasons. On June 18th, He posted several new updates, including 3 photos. One photo featured him with Melinda. The captions accompanying the posts read as a declaration of love. He claimed he had always felt but never knew how to communicate. This emotional display contrasted sharply with his previous arrogance and appeared intended to gain sympathy. Notably, he avoided any direct reference to the events of the 27th of April and 28th. He also failed to acknowledge the no-contact order or his violation of it. These posts didn't reveal any new information. Instead, they seemed designed to present a more sympathetic and regretful image of himself, likely to minimize potential legal repercussions. On the 10th of July, he posted a final message that said, "He coming home. It's time to end the dark chapter of his life and give people the closure they deserve." The post included a somber black and white photo of himself. While he promised to return, he didn't say when, where, or under what conditions he would turn himself in. In short, it was a vague promise that left his plans unclear. Ager used his Instagram posts for 2 main purposes: to control the narrative, countering the investigation and keeping the spotlight on himself, and to gauge public reaction, softening perceptions of his actions. For investigators, these posts provided valuable insight into his intentions and possible whereabouts. On July 11, 2017, in San Antonio, Texas, police arrested a man after a traffic stop. Officers stopped a car because its license plates were reported stolen from Arkansas. The license plate scan triggered an alert, leading to the stop. A search of the vehicle revealed about $600 in counterfeit $20 bills. Based on this evidence, officers arrested him for further investigation and questioning once authorities confirmed that the man in custody was Ager Hassan. U.S. officials quickly coordinated with their Canadian counterparts. It was verified that Hassan was wanted by police in Kitchener in connection with the death of Melinda Vasilije on the night of the 27th of April to 28th. This situation triggered formal cross-border cooperation protocols. Canadian authorities were notified by RD and notified as under duty. And extradition procedures began. Because the case now involved counterfeit money, federal agencies, including the United States Secret Service, became involved. Ager made brief statements but did not confess to any of the charges against him. He was being held legally in the United States for offenses committed there, while arrangements were being made to send him back to Canada to face charges. At his hearing in San Antonio, Ager's lawyers asked the court to release him on bail. They argued that he had no previous criminal record in the U.S. and was willing to help with the investigation. The prosecution opposed bail, emphasizing that Ager had run from the police for a long time after the crime, crossed the border illegally, used fake license plates, and driven a stolen car. They also noted he had counterfeit money. The court considered all the risks, including the possibility that Ager would flee again and the potential danger to the public. The judge refused to grant bail, stating that Hassan had already shown he intended to avoid being brought to justice and had previously broken the law. He will stay in United States custody until he is extradited to Canada. Meanwhile, Canada submitted a formal dossier to support the extradition request, including details of the crime, witness statements, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence. Following his arrest in San Antonio, the transfer of Ager Hassan to Canadian authorities began. The legal process took several months, involving mutual agreement under the bilateral extradition treaty, review of evidentiary sufficiency, and coordination with ongoing United States charges. Ager remained in custody throughout this time. On the 5th of January, 2018, he was extradited under escort back to Ontario to face legal proceedings in Canada. Formal charges were filed, and he was placed in a detention facility awaiting trial. From 2018 to 2019, the case went through the standard pre-trial steps for a major felony. This included preliminary hearings, sharing evidence, finalizing witness lists, and preparing forensic reports and physical exhibits. Lawyers argued about what evidence could be used in court, how it would be shown to the jury, and the order in which witnesses would testify. The trial was originally set for 2019, but it was delayed due to events that happened The global issue pandemic brought court operations in Ontario to a near standstill, especially for in-person jury trials. Priority was given to urgent cases, while complex, multi-episode trials were postponed. As a result, the trial windows for Ager's case were repeatedly delayed throughout 2021 and 2022. The court calendar was adjusted multiple times. Shifting dates, backup slots, courtroom assignments, and judge availability. The main trial to begin on the 19th of April, 2023 in Kitchener. By that point, the evidence file was comparable in volume to a full-scale homicide case. Detailed forensic analysis of injuries, a timeline of events from that night, security camera footage, and numerous messages exchanged before and after the tragedy. This marked the end of a 4-year gap between Ager Hassan's extradition and the start of legal proceedings. The delays were not due to re-evaluation of the case's merits, but to logistical hurdles and global issue. Ager's defense claimed it was not a planned act, but rather a case of self-defense. According to their narrative, the conflict erupted after Ager admitted to having been involved with other women during past breaks in his relationship with Melinda. Allegedly, she grabbed a kitchen knife and tried to strike him in the face, but hit his hands instead. He reacted instinctively, blacked out briefly, and when he regained awareness, saw her on the floor and believed the danger had passed. So, he left. A message he sent at 3:39 a.m. was presented by the defense as evidence of his belief that things might still be reconciled. Cuts on his hands were described by the defense as consistent with self-defense, and the multiple injuries were attributed to panic and chaotic motion in a confined space. The prosecution argued that it was a deliberate act. They cited witness testimony from Anna, Christina, and Ela, who confirmed that Melinda was alone with Ager in the room just before they left, and that there had been no signs of conflict prior. Surveillance footage from outside the apartment captured Melinda walking Ager to his car around 1:45 a.m. He returned alone 10 to 15 minutes later and was seen running back to his car at about 2 o'clock a.m. He never called emergency services. The autopsy revealed dozens of wounds, 27 to the neck and 6 to the chest. 2 knives were used, one with a serrated blade, which was found damaged and lying near her, and a standard kitchen knife discovered near the exit. Melinda had clear defensive wounds on her hands. The prosecution argued that Ager's cuts were not from defending himself, but resulted from his hand slipping on a blood-covered blade during the act itself. The court also reviewed the final messages exchanged between Melinda and Ager. In their communication, he showed recurring patterns of behavior. When Melinda asked for space, he would alternate between flattery, please, frustration, and promises to change. At the same time, he dismissed Melinda's boundaries, insisting they were meant to be, and denying any toxic dynamics. He also attempted to undermine her trust in her friends, implying they had selfish motives. Melinda's messages, by contrast, showed no hesitation or indication of possible reconciliation. She was firm in her intent to end all contact. To the prosecution, the message history became part of a behavioral pattern: escalating pressure after rejection, attempts to control time, space, and communication, manipulative explanations for conflicts, and efforts to discredit Melinda's close relationships. Investigators also closely examined Ager's actions on social media following Melinda's passing. Offensive messages appeared on Facebook, targeting both her memory and her mother. These degrading posts diminished Melinda's identity and significance. Prosecutors presented technical data linking these posts to Ager's devices and accounts, including IP addresses, login times, and phone models that were used in his presence. The defense argued that there was no concrete evidence proving Ager wrote the online posts. They proposed that someone else could have accessed his accounts, possibly because his passwords were compromised or due to his mental instability at the time. His lawyers further requested that the posts be removed from the case because their authenticity couldn't be verified. However, The prosecution asserted that the posts were relevant because they aligned with Ager's behavior after the crime, which included being provocative online, attempting to control public opinion, and using inflammatory language. They argued that even if someone else wrote some of the posts, their timing, tone, and the way they addressed Melinda's family resembled Ager's usual communication style. The prosecution believed including the posts would give the jury a better understanding of his character and show that Melinda's family continued to suffer emotionally after her death. For the jurors, it wasn't just a series of isolated events. It was an ongoing pattern of behavior that disregarded the victim and her family's feelings. During the final phase of the trial, the court heard personal impact statements from Melinda's family and friends describing the aftermath of her death. These statements weren't about legal arguments. They offered the jury and the judge a glimpse into how the tragedy had permanently changed the lives of those who loved her. Melinda's mother began, her voice heavy with emotion and often breaking as she spoke. She described the constant grief she felt each day, from the moment she woke up to the moment she went to sleep with the same pain. Melinda's absence had left a huge emptiness in their home, disrupting their family routines and making them feel unsafe and lost. She stressed that their suffering didn't end with Melinda's death. The court case forced them to relive the trauma, repeatedly hearing the gruesome details of the crime, seeing disturbing images, and hearing Melinda's life misrepresented in public discussions. Melinda's friends described her as kind, warm, and always willing to help. Some expressed a sense of personal guilt, feeling that maybe they could have convinced her to end contact with Ager once and for all, preventing that final meeting. Others shared memories of cherished moments, trips, and future plans that were never fulfilled. The court listened to each victim's statement without stopping them. These emotional accounts didn't change the crime's legal definition or the punishment given. However, they were a significant part of the proceedings. They served as a reminder that the charges and scientific evidence represented real people whose lives were forever altered by the crime. After the closing arguments, the courtroom was silent as everyone awaited the verdict. The jury found Ager Hassan guilty of second-degree murder after weeks of testimony and discussion. This means the jury believed he intended to kill someone, but they didn't find enough evidence to prove he planned the murder in advance. The court sentenced Ager Hassan to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 16 years. The judge made it clear that being eligible for parole doesn't mean he will be released. The parole board will consider his behavior in prison, whether he has been rehabilitated, and if he is still a danger to the community. The verdict brought Melinda's family the official end of the trial, but not real justice. They said no punishment could ever bring her back or undo their pain. Even with the trial over, they still wondered what truly happened that night. Was it a spontaneous act during an argument? Or was it a planned event? The family may never know the answer. The court delivered its legal judgment, but the motives and the thoughts in Ager's mind that night remain known only to him. For some, the evidence pointed to a spontaneous act of aggression. For others, it appeared to be calculated and deliberate. That question now lives outside the courtroom in the memories of those who knew and loved Melinda. The murder of Melinda Vasiliji not only took away an ambitious young woman, but also left an indelible scar on her family and friends. Ager Hassan's life sentence, with a 16-year non-parole period, is a step toward justice, but it does nothing to ease the pain of those left behind. Melinda's story is a painful reminder of the consequences of control and violence in relationships, and it will spur society to recognize and act to prevent similar tragedies. Although the trial has ended, Melinda's memory will live on in the hearts of those who loved her.